Well, I believe I see many of our board members on site, so to speak. And so I think we are ready to start this meeting today. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences. My name is Max Disposti. My pronouns are him is. And today is September 9, 2021. I was lost for a moment. And it's 9:02 a.m. This meeting is occurring at various locations pursuant to Executive Order N0821 that was dated on June 11, 2021. This public meeting will be held via WebEx platform. And good morning again, moderator. Could you please explain how we'll be conducting the comments portion of this meeting today? Hello? Moderator, I think we lost the moderator. It's okay, we can wait for a second. Thank you, Cesar. The moderator is going to explain for our guests and participants today the process of how to intervene, how to ask questions, and the flow of the conversation today in regards to our webinar.
Maybe we can take a quorum vote right now and establish a quorum while we wait.
Thank you, Steve. I think that's a great idea. So, Christina, if you could help us with that, and board members, as you state your presence, can you please also state if you're a public member or not? Thank you.
Good morning. Max Disposti.
Here, present.
Christina Wong.
Here, LCSW member.
Crystal Anthony.
Here, LCSW member.
Here, LCSW member.
Deborah Brown.
Here, public member.
Susan Friedman.
Here, public member, but I'm hearing an echo after everybody talks.
Try turning your volume down. I'm not getting the echo.
I'm actually getting the echo too.
Christina, I think it might be. It might be your.
Can everybody mute?
This is the moderator.
Diana Herwick.
Here, LPC member.
Christopher Jones.
Here, LEP member.
Jonathan Maddox.
Here, LMFT member.
Kelly Ranasinghe.
Here, public member.
John Sobek.
Here, LMFT, and my pronouns are he.
Wendy Stratt.
Here, public member.
And for the record, Ross Ehrlich and Yvette Posadas Willis are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. Moderator, we just jump into the quorum, but now we can go back so that you can explain to our audience and public the use of our webinar today. So thank you so much for doing so.
Sure thing. This is the moderator. Welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences board meeting. Before we get started, I would like to remind board members and staff who are not speaking to please mute their microphone. If I detect any background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will provide a brief friendly reminder or simply mute your microphone. To facilitate public comment today, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board chair reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the board's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the Q&A feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by clicking on that icon with a question mark within a square located at the bottom right-hand corner of their WebEx screen. Additionally, we'll also be using the raise hand feature, which will be available at the bottom of your participant panel. And I believe it's going to be next to your hand now on the new WebEx. Additionally, for members of the public who are connecting to the board meeting by call-in only, if you would like to indicate that you wish to make a public comment, please click *3 on your device to raise your hand. You can lower your hand by clicking *3 again. The moderator will call on individuals with raised hands after all individuals who have entered the request via the Q&A feature have been called upon. So please wait until the moderator has introduced you before making your comments. Right. Comments will be taken in the order that they are received, and you'll be given 2 minutes to make your comment with a 15-second warning. I will request to unmute your microphone, and you'll need to click the button that says unmute me when prompted. Please note that the Q&A feature is only being used as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once you are unmuted, that member of the public may verbally state their comment, and this is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. And such inquiries using this feature will not be answered. If any attendees are utilizing a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. Or you are free to express criticism or negative views for the sake of the members of the public participating on the call. Please do not use profane language when making public comments to the board. If you do not have a microphone, please click on that audio and video button up at the top of your WebEx screen and then select Switch Audio. If you need further assistance, please refer to that How to Join DCA WebEx event guide that was provided with the board meeting link.
Wonderful. Moderator, thank you so much. Thank you. So since we already assessed the quorum for today, we're moving to our item 2 of our agenda today, which is public comments for items that are not in the agenda. As a reminder, the board might not discuss or take any actions on any matter raised during these public comment sections, except of course to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Please remember to use the raise hand function like our moderator has explained if you would like to make a comment. Moderator, perhaps we can open to the public right now, and then we'll go to our board members to see if there are any discussions on items not on the agenda or any comments.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or click that raise hand icon. I misspoke earlier. The raise hand icon is now next to your name on the participant panel, not at the bottom of the participant panel. So at this point, I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow any members of the public to indicate that they would like to make a public comment. All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, moderator.
All right.
I would like to just ask my fellow board members if there are any comments or items not on the agenda for today as well. Okay, I don't see any one of you raising their hands. So we're moving forward to item 3, which is suggestions for future agenda items. I will start from my fellow board members. If there are any suggestions for future agenda items, please raise your hands or speak up. I'm trying to put you in a way I can see you all. Every time I struggle a little bit at the beginning of my journey. So it looks like none of you has any proposal, moderator. At this point, we're moving to our item number 4, which is the strategic planning sessions for the board, for our board for the year 2022 and 2026. And now in this session, actually, we have a presenter, which is Sara Irani. I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name. From the DCA solid team that will be guiding us through the process. And good morning, Sarah. I believe you're here, right?
Yes, I have multiple hats today. I'm also the moderator.
Oh, mamma mia. Okay. Great. Well, thanks for being here today in so many different capacities. Okay, then. If you need any assistance as you're presenting in terms of looking if there are any questions or so forth, maybe I can look over that as well, since you're presenting as well.
No worries. All
Okay.
right. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Mm-hmm.
One moment while I move the closed caption out of the way. All right. So welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences Strategic Planning session. Just some quick introductions. Your facilitators today will be myself, Sarah Irani, and I also have my co-facilitator on the line as well. I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself. Oh, it appears she is muted. So I will have to unmute her, maybe. One second while I try to help her get unmuted.
Good morning. This is Elizabeth Coronel. I will be assisting Sarah Irani by co-facilitating today's strategic planning session. Thank you for being patient. I apologize for the technical difficulty. And Sarah, if you can please mute me.
All right. Do I have control again of the screen? I do. There we go. Okay. So our role today, us as facilitators, will be a neutral party in this discussion. We'll also be providing structure and documenting the discussion today. Additionally, as we're typing up any notes or any of the discussion, please note that this is a first draft of your strategic plan. So we'll be correcting grammar and spelling and doing wordsmithing later. So today is more just kind of like coming up with ideas and a first draft today. All right. Nope. I apologize. I'm having some issues with the controls. Okay. So for your participation today, we do please ask that you minimize distractions. Additionally, please respect one another's contributions. If we could have just one person speaking at once, that would be great, especially since we're over WebEx and it is difficult when you have multiple people talking at once. We also ask that you please suspend judgment while doing the brainstorming. And we are on a short time limit today. So I ask that you please self-monitor for time limits and any side conversations. And then lastly, be willing to reach a consensus. If you can live with what we ask is that if you can live with it, then we'll go with it. We'll try to make sure that we are kind of in an agreement. And then once again, to reiterate the point, this is a first draft, and we can always do additional workshopping offline. All right, so our agenda today, we'll be doing some introductions, doing a quick overview of what the strategic planning process is like and where we currently are in that process. We'll quickly highlight what the mission, vision, and values are for the board. We'll talk about the goal statements. And then lastly, we'll go into objective development. And we have 6 goal areas that we're going to be reviewing objectives for. So real quick with strategic planning. Strategic planning is 3 questions. Our first one being, where are we now? And that is defined by your mission statement and then also the environmental analysis. The environmental analysis was part of that environmental scan that was given to you prior to the strategic planning session today. And that kind of highlights where the board currently is now and how both your external and internal stakeholders feel where the board is. Our second question is the where are we going? And this is explained by the vision statement. Your vision statement will illustrate a successful future where you've met all your goals and objectives. And then lastly, our third question is how will we get there? And this is your goals and objectives. And the difference between goals and objectives, because they kind of sound like they're the same thing. Goals are long-term, broad, and will give general direction, whereas your objectives are going to be more short-term and usually the length of the strategic plan. So in this case, 4 years. And your objectives are going to be a bit more narrow and give specific direction and action. To give a quick example, if your goal area was technology, an objective under that goal area could be develop software applications to support enforcement and field investigation. Your goal definitions can be redefined as part of the strategic planning process. However, that is not something we will be doing today, but we will be looking over objectives today. All right, so this is the strategic planning roadmap. And as you can see, we are currently in the 3rd step of the strategic planning process. Back in the beginning of this year, we had already completed the preliminary meetings and setups and also completing the environmental scan. If you remember, I interviewed everyone and then that information went into the environmental scan as well as the survey that went out to external stakeholders. So right now we are currently in the planning session where we will be reviewing our mission, vision, and values. We'll also review those environmental scan results. And today establish our goals and objectives. And at this point, I'll go ahead and pause and just check in if anyone has any questions. I see no raised hands. So in that case, I will go ahead and continue on. All right. So the environmental scan is based off a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And what we want to do today is make sure that we are capitalizing on those strengths and opportunities while trying to mitigate those weaknesses and threats. And so a quick comparison of the previous environmental scan, which was done in 2017, and this year's environmental scan. In 2017, we only had 534 participants. And in this year, 2021, we had 1,976 participants in the environmental scan. These are all the external stakeholders. So quite an increase from 2017. All right, and so just to quickly go over what the board's mission statement is, and that is protect and serve Californians by setting, communicating, and enforcing standards for safe and competent mental health practices. We'll want to keep this in mind when we're going over our objectives today. And then our vision statement, all Californians are able to access the highest quality mental health services. And lastly, our values are going to be accountability, customer service, integrity, quality, and respect. So keeping those in mind, when we are developing objectives, we want to make sure that our objectives are SMART. And what SMART stands for is specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-based. We want to make sure that our objectives have the details of what needs to be done, are actually measurable. We want to use action words, make sure that they are possible to attain, and also make sure that the time frame is clear when making those objectives. Our objective formula is 3 columns. So we have our action plus the goal and issue and the benefit and why. So we have a couple examples here. I'll just read off the first one, which is create is our action word. The goal and issue, which will be something that was either found in the environmental scan or was highlighted in a comment that someone made. That goal or issue can be an expert witness manual for subject matter experts. And then we ask why. What kind of benefit does this give to our stakeholders? And it's going to be to increase effectiveness of reports. Any questions at this point? I see no raised hands.
Moderator, I have a question.
I do see one unmuted mic. Yes.
So the because we do have some fairly new board members. So for the mission and the vision, any chance that we can actually continue to maybe like display it, so that we can remind the board members what really are the our mission, so that we can continue to kind of like plant the tiers, and make sure that we remind ourselves that that's what we want to do, and yeah. Is there a possibility? I didn't see the the change of the PowerPoint presentation, so that's what I'm just making a suggestion.
If anyone needs me to go back to that mission statement slide, I can. I don't believe I have a way. I might be able to do some annotation to put the mission statement up on each slide while we are looking over the objectives. That might help. So we can try that once we get to the objectives.
And my apology. Now I can see that this presentation changed. So my apology.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So we have some resources that you'll be using for determining the objectives today. The guidelines for determining objectives, the 2021 environmental scan, which once again, you should have looked over prior to today's strategic planning session. Additionally, the previous strategic plan from 2018 to 2022 can be a helpful resource when coming up with objectives. Our goals with the statements, those will be on each slide as we are going through each goal area. And then the current mission, vision, and values. And I'll try to put an annotation of what that mission statement is on each slide. That way you can have it for a quick reference. All right, so roles and responsibilities. Just as a reminder, the strategic, oh, I thought I heard someone with an unmuted mic.
Sarah, this is Kelly. The mission values, the mission and values are actually on page 4 of the old strategic plan. So I'm just flipping between both of them.
Oh, wonderful, thank you. All right, so the strategic direction of the board will rest in the hands of those involved today. Our executive officer and staff will be responsible for implementing that strategic plan and ensuring that those strategic objectives are completed. Just as a quick reminder, we do have limited time and resources, and consumer protection is the board's mandate. So at this point, we'll go ahead and jump in with our first goal area of licensing, described as establishing licensing standards to protect consumers and allow reasonable and timely access to the profession. And on the environmental scan, the summary should be on pages 9 to 15 if you want to quickly look that over once again. I'll give you a brief moment to look that over if you wish.
Yeah, thank you for allowing us. This is Max, the board chair. Thank you for allowing us because there was obviously a lot to read, and hopefully we all find the time to do that because it's really important. And perhaps this helps us to give us time between sessions. I know there are plenty and many of those, but I just don't want to penalize the process as well by rushing through, if that's okay.
And then at this point, we do have some suggested objectives, which I'll go over in just a moment, but my co-facilitator, Elle, will be typing up any comments. And at this point, I ask if you do have comments, if you could please use that raise hand feature. That way it's kind of indicating that you do have something to say. And then additionally, if you could speak slowly and clearly, that way Elle is able to capture everything that you are saying. Because it is hard to type as people are talking.
And Sarah, can I interject something?
Yes.
Just what we have done in board staff, me and the managers and I have done also is we've gone through the strategic, we've gone through the environmental scan, took some of those objectives that came out of that, and then also we've kind of in the back end here with the management staff, we've looked at possible objectives that we believe will help us in these each different areas. So that's what you'll see coming up is objectives that we think we want to strive for. Hopefully they look good to you. So just kind of a heads up. I don't know if you were going to explain that. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, actually, that was my next point. Thank you,
I
Steve.
just jumped in there. Sorry.
Yes, these objectives that are up here, they are based off the objectives that were provided both by the board management and the board members. I believe in the environmental scan, there is a section for each goal area that has a summary of the suggested objectives. And so we'll start off with licensing first, and we have our suggested licensing objectives here. At this point, I would like to ask if any of the board members had comments that they wanted to add here, or if they had an additional objective that perhaps they want to add. I'll give you a brief moment to read them over.
And just one more interjection on the licensing goal. What we're really looking at, or the way I envision it, is we're looking at how do we get, competent culturally sensitive therapists in the workforce and how we can communicate with that. So it's really the process of getting through licensure is what we're looking at. We'll have another section that does deal with kind of laws and regulation later on. So this is kind of really the nuts and bolts, encouraging people to get licensed, get them through the process, and make sure they're, it's as easy as possible for them, and making sure that we're doing that outreach to, as you see in there, one of the goals is to the, underprivileged applicants, or trying to create a culturally diverse workforce.
Max here. I just wanted to share, first of all, thank you for providing this. I mean, it's been, having 4 times the numbers of feedback from our licensees and public members. I think that's reflects the incredible job you guys are doing in reaching out in the community, because this is definitely an impressive outcome for the scanning and of the environment. This objectives that also reflect a lot of the conversation we had in past board meetings, where perhaps there were concerns brought from the public, right, about possible disparities, or how to increase the accessibility to licensing in terms of communication and so forth. Unfortunately, the board doesn't regulate, certain elements about, for instance, the cost of the profession and so forth. So it's nothing that the board can speak to it, but as close as we can get into really making sure that accessibility is granted based on our responsibility as a board members, I think this is doing really a great job. I know it could be an intimidating process. This is mostly, referring to my fellow board members, because 5 years ago when we did this, of course, being in person is different. We brainstorm, we say things, and some go well, some don't. And so I hope we can recreate that process without feeling intimidated about it, because any comments and any feedback, it really counts. It really makes a difference if there are any. Not that we had to necessarily, stop the time on every slides, but I think it's important that you feel comfortable to share anything, because everything makes it's part of the contribution. So I just wanted to add that. In my personal opinion, I think this is reflecting so far what we have been discussing and the feedback I read in the documents as well. So that's it.
All right, and this is Sarah. I see a couple of raised hands from our board members. So I'll go in the order that they're listed. I see, so first we'll go with John Sovek and then Crystal. So John, did you have any comments?
So I actually have a question that might get us started. For those of us who have not done the strategic plan before, I know there are a couple of you who have. If perhaps you could start the ball rolling by saying, I have a comment about this or that, because I'm feeling like I'm not sure where I'm supposed to step in at this moment. And we've never been trained in this process, even though we got this overview. So perhaps some of you have done this before, could kind of lead us through an example. So that'll get the ball rolling. So then we can, because I'm just feeling like, well, I have things to say, but I don't know when it's appropriate, where they go to. Do I just pick an objective and talk? I don't know. So I don't know if I'm speaking just for myself or for other people on this meeting.
At this point, we can go in order, just because it's probably easier to go, since I have them numbered here. Let me ask Crystal first for her comment, and then after Crystal speaks, we can go ahead and start from objective number 1, see if anyone has any comments, and then after that, go to objective number 2. If that sounds all right.
Yes, and then I would like to address after Crystal what the points that John made, so it maybe could be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Crystal.
I was going to just get started because I just had a comment in particular about number 4 and the underprivileged applicants. I don't know if it's like an add-on or how to like also be more specific to people with records, and how we provide more opportunity with for licensure without as many barriers for people that have already done their time and have already, like, whether they've expunged the records or they've already served a life sentence or they've already served whatever, how we're making more opportunity for people with previous records. I don't even know if that's how, I guess John's question is a great question because I don't know how do you kick it off, but that was my comment.
Okay. I'm writing that down. That way we can make sure we come back to that when we go down to objective number 4, if that's all right. Okay, thank you. And then
I just okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to make this too. I know we are only board members, so I want to make it a little bit more fluid without stepping on each other's voice. So definitely, but I don't want to feel too tight. I think, John, too, I tried to answer what your quest was. I'm not saying I have the solution, but the way we've done in the past, again, was in person. It was really a brainstorming idea. So first of all, we could go over slide by slides where for instance, in this case, licensing, right? We have 7 objectives. We can go randomly and pick one out like Crystal just did. I think that's also legit. Or we can scan them through one by one and get to the point. Now, of course, in this case, obviously Crystal brings something in that we have discussed before. So we had to discuss, is that conversation could be under one of these objectives, or maybe needs to be clear out as its own objective and things like that. We can agree or disagree. So I think that's how we've done the process. I don't know if that answers to you. Because there is so much material, of course, if we start jumping back and forth between something that we want to address that maybe is 3 slides down, could create a lot of confusion. Because then my understanding is that as we move on, we come to an agreement so that we can move on to the next slides and next objectives. That's address. I mean, that's how we've done it before. It doesn't have to be the same way, but I thought it was very helpful in the past. So I don't know if Christina wants to chime in on this, or if you guys feel this is a good process to go. I think we can stick to that. I would like to make it more fluid so that we can all go back and forth in case there are questions, or concerns and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think, that because it is, I think WebEx, on online platform, kind of limit, the fluidity, but at the same time, we also need that sort of brainstorming style. So I would actually prefer, that, if the moderator don't mind, maybe we can start with, the board members, just to give some general comments, and then we can, really start looking at, what the trend is, what the agreement, the themes, and then we should actually also open up, for the, public, so that, we can also hear their feedback. And I see Deb has her hand raised for long. So Deb, go ahead.
I think that I'd like to address John's concerns, and that is because we have so many new people. Last time that we did this 4 or 5 years ago, it was really clear, and we changed the way that we evaluate the executive officer. And it was one of the premises that we kept in mind as we discussed all of our objectives and our values. Can it be measured? Because Steve, his evaluation is based on a rubric, which you guys probably have not seen yet, that mirrors exactly what's in our strategic plan. So when Stephen gives his updates every month or every 2 months when we have a meeting, you will notice that he has the timeline. And those strategic objectives were from the strategic plan. So they all have to connect to one another. So whatever it is, and that was our biggest challenge, and that was probably the biggest conversations that we had, that although these were great objectives and they were great ideas, could they be evaluated? Could they be measured? or are we setting up our executive officer to fail? So I think that that really needs to be at the first of all, are you going to use the same evaluation of Stephen, which is directly tied to the strategic plan, in which I would hope if those, as the objectives are discussed, you ask for input from Stephen on how can and does this look like it's measurable? Because he doesn't want to stab himself in the foot by saying, yeah, that's a great objective. And then you guys, you know, because the three of us that worked on this before, Max will be the last man standing on the last strategic plan to be able to walk you guys through the evaluation. And it's just a very, the evaluation is a rubric. It's very mathematical. It's not personal. It's did you meet the board's objectives in their strategic plan? And I'm telling you, the conversations were fantastic and they continued to go around the room because sometimes some of our ideas are not measurable. And so we have to continually operationally define what is it we really truly need to bring to the forefront and hold our executive officer and his staff accountable. But if you'll just, I don't know if you have access to them, but every meeting Stephen brings up when he does his board report. And if you'll remember looking at all those are absolutely the objectives. And as a board, you set the timeline, but you have to have the conversation with Stephen. So we could have a pie in the sky. We want to see enforcement do a better job, and we want to see it done next quarter. Stephen, is that doable? Well, given the situation, given the number of employees, et cetera, and we have that conversation, that might not be doable. So we have to set out a reasonable timeline. And then the executive officer is held to that. And you will, as board members, each time that that's approached with your new strategic plan, you have the ability to say, well, or Stephen will address beforehand if you've set a deadline and he can't make it. And you as the board have every right to say, why not? What are the circumstances that involve this objective that we've missed? It can be employees, it can be COVID, it can be when we had all the layoffs, the budget, it can be a myriad of things. But those are the discussions that you have every tell you. Now, here's what the best part of this. At the end of the day, when you do your evaluation and you get your matrix, you can go back and look to see if Stephen has met all of the objectives. And then you will give it a number, a numerical value, and then the chair will calculate all of it. And then we'll come back and you guys will have a grand discussion about whether or not that he's met all the objectives of your strategic plan. So I just want to throw that out there because there's a lot of conversation. Sometimes I think what we found was sometimes our ideas are great ideas, but they're not measurable ideas. And I just want to put that out there for the platform and to make it, as you can see, our vision. It's very holistic. And we wanted to make sure that it was broad enough, but narrow enough that we met as board members our charge from the state of California. Because it was pretty narrowly defined before, which left out a lot of opportunities. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to put all the opportunities in there. But I just want to throw that out there before we start discussing all kinds of objectives that we might want to change or all of that. Keep in mind, can we measure them? Please get input from Stephen. Is it doable? And then have all of that before you start setting the deadlines that Stephen will be measured by.
This is the moderator real quick, if I could interrupt. So our time frame for these objectives are going to be the length of the strategic plan. So when you're thinking for time frame, I guess kind of have more in mind that 4 years rather than a specific quarter in a specific year. Those will be done during the action planning step of the strategic planning process, which will be done with Stephen and the staff. So we won't be going into too specifics of deadlines and timelines today. Right now, we really just want to keep that time frame to 4 years. Additionally, I think what will be the best structure here is to go over these suggested licensing objectives that Stephen and the other managers from the board have come up with, and then we'll go in order. If you have comments on that one that we're on, use the raise hand feature and then we'll comment on it. If no one has any comments or we're done discussing, then we'll move on to the next one. I do want to reiterate that we are short on time, and I want to make sure that we're able to get through all these objectives. So quickly before we go ahead and start off with that, number one, I do have raised hands from Kelly and John. I want to make sure that they're able to provide their comments because they've had their hands raised for a while, and I want to make sure they're able to voice whatever they needed to say.
Did you mean to say Jonathan?
Jonathan, yes.
So, one, I appreciate the structure, and I have some feedback about specific objectives once we start working through them. But could you give us a time frame? Because you keep saying generally, we're short on time. Could you tell us maybe more specifically what that means, and then we can govern ourselves because we know what the time constraints are. That would be helpful.
Correct. So the meeting today, I have us expected to wrap up around 1 p.m. because we do have the telehealth committee at 2 on the same WebEx. If we go over 1 o'clock, that's all right, but probably a hard deadline at 2 when the telehealth committee is supposed to begin.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then
this
Kelly?
is Kelly. As to objective 1, I agree. I just note that I think it's a good objective because the application process is one of the things which is very challenging to applicants with disabilities, particularly applicants with mental illness. So, and I'm thinking about the judicial application, which can actually be almost 54 pages long, and when it's completed, it can go to 94 pages, and that's the online application. So. As much as we can do to streamline the application process and make it compact and narrow, I think will be helpful. So I think that's a perfectly good measurable objective.
All right. Do we have any other comments on objective 1 for licensing? I see hand raised still from Jonathan. I don't know if that's left over from last time. All right. In that case, we'll go ahead and move on to 2. Any comments on this suggested licensing objective?
I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm trying to figure out where to raise hands. And just to let the board members know also, like the comment just made by Kelly, I'm taking notes too, because what will eventually end up is really, these are kind of the broad objectives. And then we can actually, what I'll be looking at is including making sure we are addressing disabilities and such while in our application process. And that'll be a task that we will look at. So just to let you know.
I have a grammatical suggestion because it's kind of wonky. Maybe just change it to collaborate with DCA to review the application process and implement improvements, because to review application review processes to me sounds wonky. So I would just adjust that to maybe a clearer sentence.
Okay, so we're adding the word the after or between 2 and review.
And then taking out the second review and turning the word processes to process.
All
The
right.
co-facilitator, just getting confirmation that we do want to change the wording or do a little bit of wordsmithing on this objective.
I think we can go ahead and do that since it's real quick.
Move the second review, and so collaborate with DCA to review the
Yes.
okay.
Application processes. Okay. Yep.
I think if it's the, it has to be process. If you want to say processes, you have to take out the.
All right. Any other comments on suggested objective 2?
I have my hand raised. Can you see that, moderator?
Unfortunately, I cannot.
Okay, so.
But go ahead.
Okay, so to me, the online submission, I mean, both the number 1 and number 2 are very similar. And so the application, so I think the only difference really is about, I think that both of the goal is to decrease the processing time. So whether it's about, to collaborate with DCA or to do the online submission. So, maybe we should actually combine those two. And, with a goal, basically, is just to reduce the processing time. And so, yeah, that's my comment.
Right. I see multiple hands raised. I think I'm going to go with Steve first because I believe he has a direct comment to Christina. I will say what we can do is if some of these objectives sound similar, we can just make a note to say combine them and workshop that offline, just so because once again, these are going to be kind of more like a first draft. So I'll go ahead and let Steve speak.
Just really quick, I mean, I like the idea of having less objectives that can be fleshed out with the actual tasks. And yeah, I mean, if we want to be more specific, we can just say streamline application process, to implement, improve, or, to reduce processing times. I mean, that's, yeah.
Can we wait before we change? I see some editing process. I'm sorry, because I have some concern about that. But I know Wendy was first, so I don't want to speak yet.
Wendy, if you're speaking, you're currently muted.
Great, thank you. You think after all this time I would be used to that. But I was going to share kind of Max's concerns about combining them because in my mind, we have kind of two different objectives here. One is more about modernizing the process to keep up with the times and with the populations that we're serving. And the other is about streamlining the process or reducing time. So these are kind of, in my mind, they're still two different objectives, even though they sound the same. So maybe something in number 1 could be, maybe we introduce the word modernize somewhere in there instead of streamline, just to keep that focus on, where technology is going and kind of keeping up with how people want to interact and submit information. So that was my comment on those two.
And thank you, Wendy. That's exactly what I wanted to point out. I remind our board members that we had situations where the communication with the DCA was, needed, didn't occur in certain cases. So there was misunderstanding. So creating a process also in that communication and also making sure we are on the same page is really could help, because sometimes we have cases coming back and forth where created a lot of questions for the board members about why this was, returned to us. Or anyway, I think there are completely two different objectives, even though they sound the same. It's specifically, I like the idea that we spell out the relationship with the collaborations with the DCA because it helps us, it helps them too. So I would really like to keep that in place with the suggestion that Wendy made.
Oh,
And
right.
I see John. Yeah.
Oh, I was about to say the same thing. I see hand raised from John.
Sorry, I don't mean to step in. It's as a
No
board chair, I
worries,
have
you're
to-
all right.
So I agree that they're separate as well, because I think the number one is actually a stakeholder, customer facing, outward facing process. And number two is an internal process, working with staff, working with processes, how we store things, how we document. So I think they're two very different objectives, with one being outward facing and one being internal.
Oh, right. And I also see a hand raised from Christina Wong.
Thank you. So, maybe this is a question for Steve. My understanding of all these application and stuff is very internal. It all belongs to just the board themselves. So I'm really wondering is like, what would be the possibly, the involvement of DCA, to help out, what will be some, activities, that can be done, with the DCA.
Well, honestly, we're already in a kind of a process with DCA. They have an organizational improvement office, and we're utilizing those resources to actually look at our whole, the way we do the actual physical processing of an application. So that's what we're looking at for them. Honestly, it doesn't even really need to stop at DCA, because I mean, eventually we might even discover that there's possibly another program or something that might help us to, change the process internally on how we move forward on these applications. So, yeah, so that's what that was that comment was going to.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those are important information that probably, the board members, don't know. And I don't even know that, they have actually resources. So yeah, thanks for the explanation.
All right, and I see a hand raised from Max.
Oh, sorry, no.
Leftover from last time?
Leftovers.
All right. In that case, everyone comfortable with objectives 1 and 2?
Appears to be.
All right. In that case, let's go ahead and look over objective number 3 there. Do we have any comments on this one? See a hand raise from Max?
Yes, for real now. So I don't know if this is a problem of language or not, but I know the work of aligning licensing standards with the for all licensing types has been an ongoing work that the BBS has done. So it's not something we haven't started yet. I know it's still going on, right? Because every time we have new implementations, we want to make sure that they're applicable across the board. So I wonder if we just could add, if my board members agree, to continuing aligning the licensing standard requirements, because otherwise it erases all the work we have done already on doing so. So I wonder if that's significant or not. But I think it's for fresh eyes, that's good. Good for people to know. I believe also this was an objective of the previous strategic plan, because we really were in their needs of doing that to bridge the disparities in the lack of consistencies between different licensees. So that's it. That's the old comment I have.
My co-facilitator has put a co-facilitator has up. I also see a couple hands raised, Roseanne and Christina. I'm not sure who had their hand raised first.
Go ahead, Roseanne. I follow you, and I see Chris Jones also.
Yeah, I just wanted to second to say that I agree with what Max said. The kind of making licensing standards and the law consistent across all license types is an ongoing effort that we examine sort of on a case-by-case basis as things come up. In some cases, in a lot of cases, it is appropriate. It's not always appropriate to do, though, based on various factors. So I think we want to be a little careful on how that's worded. So I just wanted to say I agree with Max.
All right, and Christina?
And I agree with Roseanne and also Max, because I think, this is, to me, is too broad. And also, we know that some of the licensing standards and requirement, among the 4.1 will never really be the same, especially for LEP. So I think my thought is actually, I'm going to make a bold suggestion, is to take this one out. And I think, Chris, you were after me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know if I could just jump in or if I needed to be called on. Sorry. No, I agree.
Oh,
As the
my
LEP,
apologies. I didn't see a hand raised.
no, that's okay. I can't. I forget how to do the hand raise thing on the.
If you open up your participant panel on the right-hand side, if you hover over your name, the little raise hand icon will appear, and it'll be next to your name.
There you go. It's right there, like you told me. All right. So no, I concur. Because the LEP is the licensing requirement is vastly different from the other 3 licensees. So I would just be cautious and make sure. I mean, one of my goals has always been to align us as much as possible. But understanding that we come from different backgrounds and things like that. So I would like to make sure that we that we just do that cautiously.
So I don't know if it was before me or Kelly, but since I already spoke, maybe Kelly should go first.
I was just going to say I agree with Christina. That is a heavy thing for any person to lift, along with all of the other objectives that we're setting up. And how exactly do you quantify aligning every licensing standard in California? And there's a lot of things that would be out of Steve's control in any event, that are out of our control. So I'm kind of with Christina on this. I think we pull that one and focus on the other 6.
Okay. I just for clarification.
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I don't see anybody else, so I'm going to. So for clarification, the Board of Behavioral Science has been doing this with licensing within obviously our jurisdictions, right? For the BBS. So perhaps definitely the wording is not clear. I like the initial proposal. So the reason why I wouldn't like to take it out, because this is work we've done in the past and continue to do. Anytime we get into, now telehealth, that we always have to take in considerations how it's applicable to the different professions within the jurisdictions that we occupy. So I think it's good work, but without the pretentiousness of making everyone on the same place, like, John will say. We have to be careful not, we're not creating a standard for one license and then automatically replicating that for all the other licensees. And that's why Roseanne spoke about the fact we know and we're aware about the differences, so that's not the goal. I wonder if instead of taking it out, because again, it's work that we do, like we're doing right now with the licensee at telehealth, I think maybe we should say continue when possible or whenever applicable, aligning licensing standards and requiring for all licensees types. Because what happened, for those of you that weren't here before, is that sometimes we had requirements for a licensee in areas where it should be equal to other licensees, and that's why the disparity have arisen, where we ask MFT to do certain things on reporting, which is not equitable for others. So it's on certain area licensing that we've seen the disparities, and that's why the BPS intervened, because we were all over the place 10 years ago on requirements, and a lot of representations from the different licensee felt directly affected by the lack of consistency. So I think that's what they're referring to. I think it's important for us to continue to do the work, but I totally acknowledge the concerns that everyone else has brought to the table. So I don't know, Christina, if you feel like that could be justifiable, like to keep it on, but with the definitions that it's a little bit clearer, so it doesn't feel like a replication of one licensing into the other, and that's it. And
yeah. So, my feedback to you is that, I'm constantly thinking about, that, if we want to quantify it, it will be, for example, supervision, aligning the supervision standard or, or whatever standard. So I think, the licensing standard is so broad, that, that's for one. And for two, we know that, it's not going to be accomplishable. That's my new word today. My created word, it's not, you can't accomplish with just that align, with the LEP, not to really, distinguish it and single it out. But I think, LEP is just, one of the type that, is distinctively different. And so that's why I think, from just the wording itself, it's that I think it's, it's just way too broad. And like Roseanne say, it is a continuing process, also even in the legislative level. And so I think that might not belong to, the licensing, not just about the licensing, but, but really, it can be, somewhere, maybe about the legislation, to really start to look a little bit, tighter is, what area that you have done. I mean, previously we have done so much, that like the MFT, buckets that, that supervising experience for the AMFT, we have already, done it, the whole supervision bill, we aligned, all the, like the clinical hours and stuff like that. And so I think, it's a lot that has already been done, and there's still a lot to, be accomplished. But at the same time, I personally think that there are a lot other priorities. And this is only the strategic planning that it just becomes our focus. It doesn't mean that, we're not gonna, continue to, to do that. So I think to me, it's like this, we have done so much work that, I think we can probably, in our strategic planning wise, we can put it aside. That's just my take.
Hi, this is John. I actually have a thought. Is this actually in the wrong category? Is it possible that this is an objective, but it's more about aligning regulation of policy standard requirements for all license types? It is not actually a licensing objective. Perhaps we've got it in the wrong area, and we could consider taking it out of here and holding it to see if it fits under a different objective more effectively.
This is Sarah. Let me double check what suggested ones we have for legislation regulation to see if maybe there's already something similar there.
I think I would like to hear from Roseanne, since also she had her hand raised, and I know she has a lot of insights.
Yeah, I agree with both Christina and John, actually. I think that if it is something that we want to keep, we can put it under legislation regulation goals, because that's really where it starts. There might be some processing and licensing where, we can make it streamlined across, but really that all starts with legislation and regulation. That is correct. And I don't know. I mean, it's kind of something that I do just as part of my job. It's kind of an ongoing on an as needed basis. Let me give you a couple of examples. This year, when we were reviewing some law, we noticed, and we're pursuing in the Omni bill, there was some language that didn't exist for LCSWs about suspended licenses and expirations. It's just sort of some enforcement language about the procedure. So we decided to add that in for consistency. Because, if one license type, if the other 3 license types have it, all of the license types probably should have it. So we did stuff like that. We also do things like if we see a bill that somebody else is running, that maybe lists 3 of our license type as potential supervisors of some type of employee, but it leaves out, usually it's LPCCs that get left out. I will actually contact the author's office and say, hey, maybe you should think about adding in LPCCs too. So we do a lot of work on that level, but it's just kind of an automatic thing. I don't think it hurts any to leave it in there, but it's not something that's ever going to be completely, you're never going to be able to check it off your list because it's an ongoing process. And also there are certain aspects of the professions where people have one thing, like for example, MFTs can count pre-degree hours. The other license types in the past haven't wanted the opportunity to do that because it can affect portability for them to other states. There's some things that with LCSWs that their particular profession is a little bit different from the other two professions, and they like it that way because that's how their profession has evolved nationally. So just kind of something to think about that objective. Just because if it comes off the list, it doesn't mean that effort is going to stop, because it is important for us to function, to have consistency across the license types when possible.
Right. I have my hand raised from my co-facilitator. I think she wanted to add some comments.
Thank you. This is co-facilitator Elizabeth. My question, after hearing the conversations, the discussions, we do typically encourage clients not to include day-to-day items or tasks. So I believe I heard that this item is ongoing, has been done in the past, will be continued to be done in the future. And my question is, would you like to leave it off, knowing that it's ingrained in your day-to-day activities, it's your day-to-day tasks? Again, we do encourage objectives that are something that you can complete at the end of your strategic plan and check off your list and move on with other objectives. And just a friendly reminder that the objectives are typically issues or items that you want to, one-time issue or items that you want to address. So that was my comment. Thank you.
I'm also okay with anything that we decide to do. So it's not like I definitely would like to move forward. So I'm okay with any decision we make in this regard. So it's not a problem. If we want to perhaps extrapolate this and introduce it into another slides for objectives based on licensing.
I see hand raised from both Roseanne and Steve. I'm not sure who would like to speak first.
I forgot to take it down. Sorry.
Hi, and after Elizabeth spoke, I don't know if my comment's going to be good, but it probably does reside in the legislation part, legislation regulation. The reason I would, like to keep it in is, understandably, these are things within 4 years. It's a daily process. But I think a lot of times the work of like Roseanne and staff, we don't really see what is moving us forward, and we don't record that. So I think having this in the strategic plan saying, we're going to continue to align licensing standards, we can revisit that on a monthly basis saying, what have we done this month to, align these standards, and then use it as a tool to present to the board saying, here's where are we moving forward? I mean, are we not? Is that okay? Is that not? So that's the one thing I would prefer to keep it in there as kind of a guiding post for us to like revisit every so often to make sure that we are moving forward on some of these things. So that is my 2 cents.
Yeah.
All right. I see hand raised from Christina.
Then I would really suggest that maybe move it to, the legislation portion, because, eventually, it really is about, changing, the existing language, the legislative language. And so, so I think that might be a possibility, that, maybe that's just my thought.
All right. So it sounds like the consensus is moving this objective over to LegReg. Any objections before my co-facilitator makes that change? see no hands raised. In that case, we'll cut that and put it in ledge reg. L, that slide will be slide 41. And then when we get to ledge reg, we'll workshop that one a little bit more. So at this point, we'll go ahead and, oh, I see hand raised from Jonathan.
No, my desire is to comment on the previous number 4, which is now number 3.
Oh, thank you. So yes, we're going to move here. I know Crystal had comments on this one also. I don't know, Crystal, do you want to go first, or do you want Jonathan to go first?
I'll just, if it is okay, Jonathan, if I just go really quick so I can say again what I said before. Okay. I guess like I don't know how to add this, but I just feel like some of the barriers are such big barriers that they almost have to be like standalone or like be stated so that they can be worked on specifically. And just 2 barriers that I've seen that make it really difficult for licensing and the road to licensure for a lot of people, even after they've done their time, is previously incarcerated people, people with records. And I would even say, this is a new category, would be people with special needs that have challenges with taking the test and the length of the test and not giving the option to do like a verbal test or an oral exam. And I'm saying this because I feel like even the DMV allows people to take the test orally, or they can do like a paper exam. And I don't feel like as like speakers of like of people who serve underserved populations, mostly in our communities, that we're giving that opportunity to people who are on the road to becoming licensed therapists. And so those are just things I mean, I would like to discuss with the other board members and hear their opinions. But those are things that I do see day to day, and people that have challenges. And oftentimes it's people with learning disabilities and people with previous records.
All right. Jonathan, you had your hand raised next.
Yeah, so I would say of all the goals that we're creating, this is probably one of the most important as we look at sort of the lack of reflective practitioners across the state and our desire to sort of diversify our workforce. So I'll say that to say, I think the way it's currently worded, it's more of an idealistic statement. It's not in SMART format. So I think we can better sort of write this goal in a way that it actually allows us to do what we're saying we need to do to create this diversified workforce. And so I just, and while I'm in agreement with Crystal, because there are so many barriers, I think in order for us to begin to address them, we need to identify them first. So I wrote something to the effect of identify and reduce barriers to licensure in order to increase the diversity of the workforce. Because I think what we're really trying to do is impact the diversity of the workforce and not just, I don't like the word underprivileged because it doesn't really say anything. It just, okay, everybody's underprivileged on some level. So I think our goal is to diversify the workforce. So I think we should identify and reduce barriers in order to increase the diversity of the workforce. So that's my 47 cents on that. But I will reiterate, it's a very important goal because there are just so many missed opportunities for Black and Brown and other communities to have therapists who look like them in the field. And to Crystal's point, there are some significant realities that exist around people's past, their learning styles and things of that nature. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I'm next. I was next and then John. I think I totally agree with this. I thank you, Crystal, for bringing this forward. And I love the way Jonathan really put it together, because in one way, I mean, the statement was completely watered down, didn't say anything, but then also we don't want to do the laundry list, right? Because we always could let someone out. So I like the statements because in the assessing and researching no, actually, identifying, sorry, I couldn't read that. I think it's really, really a great statement because really allow us, it's our ongoing work and process so that we don't leave anyone out, that we are intentional about doing this work and not just like calling out people using a word that could be really mean anything at the same time. So yeah, I like actually the modification that Jonathan brought up. I'm even in favor to adopting that. And I know there is John Savek. I'm sorry, moderator.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, so I think our ability to identify and reduce is actually the least we can do. I think we actually need to look at making this even more proactive and taking steps to create equitable access. Because I think the endeavor to eliminate and the identify and reduce has a little bit of passivity to it. But I think taking a proactive stance, if we want to create equitable access to increase the diversity of the workforce, is saying we are going to take action, not just identify and reduce, but we're actively going to step out into our communities and be part of this conversation.
All right, my co-facilitator has written that one down as well. I see hand raised from Chris Jones.
I can't beat the statements from the Jonathan and Crystal. Those were good. I was just going to say that reads more like it read more to me like a goal versus an objective, because of our need to identify all the barriers. So I think that as it's been redefined over the last 2 to 3 statements, I think it looks great.
All right, and then I see a hand raised from Kelly.
So yeah, and I agree with everything that everyone has said, particularly what that ensuring that there's more equitable access, particularly for people with prior criminal records and learning disabilities, is going to be very important. And also kind of 3 and 6 sort of go together, because 6 is partnering with other agencies and stakeholder groups to foster a diverse and culturally competent mental health workforce. I'm not sure you want to wordsmith that, but I think there are actually 2 distinct objectives. One is partnering, one is identifying and work of anti-racism. And the only other thing I'd mention, and this is just as a basis for this objective, is that we know through peer-reviewed evidence that a diverse mental health clinical population that serves a diverse population is actually more effective, so, and safer. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, I see hand raised still from John Sovek. I'm not sure if that's leftover from last time or additional leftover from last time, I think. All right, and Susan, I see your hand raised.
I can't tell if I'm unmuted, but anyway, can you?
Now you're unmuted, yes.
I hated the word underprivileged. It's like, it just stood out as something absolutely ridiculous. And I really like what everybody has contributed to identify exactly what it is we're talking about. I don't know how we add in there, or maybe we don't have to add in there anything about cultural, to include all cultural, California cultural differences. I'm not exactly sure how to word it, to be quite honest, and I'm not sure we need to add it, but I do think that's an important thing to put in there someplace, because I do know that just from reading some of these surveys that have been done, there is great anger from various cultural groups about their elimination and being included.
All right, and Steve, I see your hand raised.
So I don't know if it would be just kind of proposing this, that we take those 3 excellent statements. Thank you for, those are way better than what we had on there. And definitely speak to what we really need to be doing. I think the suggestion was that number 6, we could kind of fit in, I think, with a statement that's crafted out of the 3 that we have there. How about the staff can wordsmith it using those 3 statements, and just the 6 is kind of a, that probably will end up as being part of our task list, is, looking to see how we can reach out. That's a proposition I'm making. So.
Steve, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, Max here. I didn't quite get what you were trying.
So
I was still focusing. Yeah, go ahead.
Man, I got a cough going on. So looking at taking we have the three excellent statements there, is like really going back, and we can craft, wordsmith those, making sure we capture everything in there. And then really kind of eliminating 6, because 6 is, in essence, the work that would be done in those, in number 3, is really kind of, it would be part of that. It would be part of the task, I think, or we would have to definitely reach out for partnerships and to look and kind of. So I'm thinking, proposing getting rid of 6 and letting staff look at crafting that number 3, bringing it back for approval. We can talk about it again just to make sure we've captured it appropriately. That makes sense.
So I know, because thank you. I know some movements are happening, so I'm trying to figure out. So 6 now, I need to wait for a second, because now I'm confused with the numbers, so which one you're actually referring to. So now we have.
Apologize, this is the co-facilitator. I will guide you through what I just did.
Thank you.
Number 6 is now under number 3, and it's more of a comment. Here I added incorporate to number 3, and this is originally number 6. Partner with other agencies. Mm-hmm.
So that would become, I'm sorry.
Steve, I agree, as long as though we spell out the collaborations with entities that we are actually collaborating with, because it's not necessarily one linked to the other. I'm concerned that this intentional partnerships is put out there needs to be, they could, for instance, the measurable outcome could be that every quarter the board invites in, external, if folks doing presentations in regards to specific communities and the disparities that they're living, or could be the BBS staff being properly trained on certain cultural aspects of mental health. So I just want to make sure, if we want to include it under 3, it's okay, but we need to spell it out, because it's something that we struggle in the past. It was on and off, so I want to make sure that's there, that doesn't disappear.
And that's what my looking at this, what my thought was, is that this would become a task within this objective. It would be, okay, this is what we're looking at achieving. How do we do that? One of it is, one of the objectives, or one of the task lists, is to get involved with these stakeholders. But what does that mean? What are we going to do? Here's the stakeholders we are listing out that we want to get involved with. How are we going to do that? Really, what the objective will lead, this will be part of the objective. So if that makes sense, does that make it? It's really, we will make the check boxes for how we're going to actually implement that.
Okay. I know I see that. Yeah.
I see hands raised from Kelly and Crystal. I believe Kelly had his hand raised first.
Hi, this is just an easy fix. Can we please change the term competent to responsive or sensitive? We don't use the term culturally competent anymore because it was deemed patriarchal. We use culturally responsive or culturally specific or cultural humility. Responsive is probably the easiest term to use. Responsive. Okay.
That was responsive.
IVE?
It's there you go.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then Crystal?
I don't know why, and maybe I'm kind of feeling like Max a little bit, but I feel like number 3 is getting lost with the number 6, and I don't think they should be combined. Because I do feel like number 3 is really strong all by itself, and it's really something that needs to be focused on. And when we add in like all this extra stuff, it's like we're not focusing back on like the actual problem. And I feel like, and this is just my thought too, is that this one should be like copy pasted into the legislation pieces, because I do feel like the board should be hopefully like focused on legislation that impacts people with barriers, since we do have legislation that pops up in front of us often, and to take away barriers for people of color, for people with certain backgrounds and things like that. But I don't know if I agree that they should be merged, because I do think that number 6 should be part of all of it. Like it actually should be part of every part of our this list probably. But to take it and put it into like this one, I just feel like while it helps this one, it starts taking away from that original goal, I feel. So I don't know if other people feel that way. Maybe they don't, and maybe we still keep it together, but those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, this is Jonathan. I'm sorry. Did somebody else have their hands up? I just jumped in like I always do. Sorry.
We do have some hands raised. I'm not sure if you want to go ahead and go first, or we'll go ahead and.
I'm never a fan of cutting. I'll wait my turn.
I see a hand raised from Kelly still. I don't know if that's leftover from last time. Okay. Deborah.
So, Crystal, I hear what you're saying. So, in the vein of being measurable, what do you suggest, or give an example of what that task could be that at the end of the day could actually be measured? Because I hear your concern about squishing them together.
Let me think about it. Let me think while we're chatting, and then I'll come back to you.
The reason I say that is that's because that's where I come from. It's because at the end of the day, Stephen has to be evaluated on it. So with that, I was just wondering if we were to, I understand your concerns about smishing them together, but if we were to break them apart, and I understand why, and you have valid reasons for that, how could we measure? Maybe there's an example you could throw out there that could actually be measurable, that could help us.
Yeah, well, maybe even when somebody goes to register to do like a registration as a ASW or AMFT, whatever the registrant things are, maybe there should be check boxes of like kind of like when they ask us if you're Hispanic, Latino, Black, white, who are you? There should be a checkbox. It's like, have you ever been incarcerated before? Yes or no? And we start documenting to see like how many people that have had previously incarcerated records. Like we could do some research on this, because the barriers that people carry. I don't know if you've ever had a friend, anybody on this board has had a friend that's getting their license, but it is really difficult. And we don't make it easy for people. And these are people who've already done their time, who've already done their therapy, who've already done all those things. And then we make them have to redo stuff and get re-traumatized. So how, as us as helpers, are we helping our consumers and the populations that we serve? And I always go on my high horse about these specific topics. So I'll chill out a little bit, because I know I'm talking to people who understand. So I know that you guys do understand. So all I'm saying is like, I just don't want it to get lost. And because I feel like everybody made such great comments, and so it's like I don't want it to get lost in the other stuff that's like important too, but can stand alone, because it was standing alone prior to us seeing it.
And I absolutely agree with you. And that's why I would say, how can we pull that and make it an objective, and actually measure that? And so, like you said, let's think about that. But I'm the one that always is can we measure it? Can we measure it? Can we measure it? Because the evaluation at the end of the day on Stephen is whether he accomplished what you set out for him to do, or the board rather.
And Deb, this is John Sovek. I actually think we already have something in place that is doing something similar. Every time when we're having these outreaches to different communities, speaking at schools and stuff like that, it's all being notated in the report from Steve, and also in that newsletter that's going out. So perhaps we actually put it under that as how how it's a rateable objective is the number of schools that he spoke to, the number of times he spoke with camp, that all of that's already being marked. And we just include this as part of what those conversations always include. Because we do already have him marking when he's doing outreach to these communities. We're just saying, we want you now, and you're partnering with him to include this as an important part of the conversation.
Yeah.
That's great. You see, this is fun.
I know we have nobody speaking. Okay.
I saw a bunch of hands raised and then they were lowered. I just want to make sure if anyone had any comments on this still.
John basically took my comment. John said what I was going to say.
Okay. John, go ahead. And I also have Jennifer Alley, who will go after. Oh, John, I believe you were muted.
You would be correct. One of the things that I want to make sure as we're creating this, that we're also really careful that when we're talking about diversity, we are not just talking about cultural diversity. We've mentioned learning disabilities, but I also think we have to learn sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those pieces. I know cultural diversity is a really strong, like smart, objective thing to put in, but I just want to make sure that this diversity is looking out. You know, the barriers to a trans therapist applying for licensure, how does that play out in this? So we're not just landing only in cultural, but we use this more diverse workplace, the wording that Jonathan gave us earlier. I think that's really vital in this.
Thank you, John.
Hello?
All right. And then I see hand raised from Jonathan Maddox, and then we'll go to Jennifer.
Yeah, so I mean, I just want to make sure, we're aware that we don't have to sort of get knee deep in the weeds when we create this. We want the language to say what we want it to say and be broad enough for the board to have room to creatively implement what it is that we want to see. The end of the goal is we want to see a diversified workforce, and we do that by identifying and reducing barriers, but we don't have to tell them how to do it here. That's part of their job, is to brainstorm as an agency and figure that out. And then at the end, we can look back at the end of the year and say, what sorts of things have you done to identify and reduce these barriers? And then that would speak to what that one says, which is maybe he says, hey, we have had stakeholder group conversations with some of our stakeholders and blah, blah, blah. So I just want to just be careful that we're not getting too deep in the weeds, because that's not what we're supposed to do here. It's supposed to be directive and not proscriptive. So let's just keep that in mind too.
All right. And I have a hand raised from my co-facilitator, Al.
This is Elizabeth. Thank you. Yes, that was a really good point that the previous speaker just brought up. With objectives, we do recommend that they're not, we recommend that they are not too specific. So if you see here towards the bottom of the PowerPoint notes, I added the term action planning notes, and I added people with previous criminal records, people with learning disabilities, people from diverse cultural groups. So I've been trying to capture some of those groups that you've all been mentioning. And of course, if I missed any, please let me know. I can continue to add them. But we do encourage, typically as facilitators, to make the objective a little bit broad. So when they're being implemented, the board has some room to be able to do a little bit more if you may not necessarily being pigeonholed by specific terms or specific groups, so they can be a little bit, have more authority or ability to address more than just a specific group. Not that one specific group is not important, they're all important, but that was a really good comment. And that is something as facilitators that we do encourage our clients to, if you have a specific list of items for any of the objectives, whether it's creating new laws and regulations, and you want to list out the laws, we recommend leaving it broad. So when the time comes and action planning comes, you can start brainstorming, identifying, doing some research, and then start identifying those specific laws. So in this case, if for example, 3A, identifying reduced barriers, the work of the board would be to identify the barriers first, which might include some of these here that we have in the action planning notes. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Elle. I did have a hand raised from Jennifer earlier, but it's lowered. I'm not sure if she still had comments or not.
This is Jennifer Alley with Camp. I think I raised my hand a little premature because I would actually go under public comment. I don't want to go out of line with the board and their comments.
Oh, I apologize. In that case, let me move you back down. And then when we will take public comment after each goal area. So at that point, yeah, you can do the raise hand. All right. In that case, we are all okay with number 3, and then we will kind of do some more workshopping offline to get it to where we need. And then we also have some comments that we're going to use when we get to the action planning stage. I see no raised hands, so we'll go ahead and move on to it's got a number 1 next to it now, but it should be number 4. Increase. Oh, thank you, co-facilitator. Increase communication to applicants and licensees. Do we have any comments on this one? Jonathan?
Yes. So I think it's always good to increase communication, but my concern is that maybe we should also add the word "and improve," because I think if we're doing more of the same thing and it's not working, then that's not necessarily a good thing. So maybe we could look at there's always a process of sort of improving how we do it and the quality with which we do it. So my thought would be to add "improve" in there somewhere, just so we're always doing assessing sort of how well we're doing it and then making any necessary adjustments.
All right, and Christina?
Yeah, I just want to point out that, with a different language, but it's the same, it's a very similar goal that we had in the last, strategic planning, in our strategic plan. So, I don't know if we can, we need to maybe do something new, because I think improving the communication is another ongoing process. So, I just want to point that out.
Also, yeah, I agree with Christina. I'm a little bit troubled by the fact that that the scope of the increased improvement communication is to reduce common applications of licensing maintenance or error. It's kind of like passive aggressive. It almost puts on applicants like, we need to communicate better with you so you do the right job. I don't like it. I think we need to leave it a little bit broader so that, because the increasing of an improvement of communications causes a lot of benefits. It's just beyond just the applicants, even though we know that's been an issue. But I would like to make it more affirming and positive, because also it's to increase feedback, right? It's to enhance the communication so that we can do better. So I would remove the step of to read. It's changing as I go, or maybe my eyes are killing me. It's just that, yeah, there's not just for avoid errors. I think that's a little bit too reductive in my opinion.
The co-facilitator, if you can please repeat, what words would you like me to remove?
They were so it was increase improved communication to reduce common applications or licensing maintenance errors. I thought that was too specific and a little bit narrow, and because it's not that the only reason why we're doing this. It's also to affirm in our relationships in a positive way. It's not just to reduce errors from the applicants. So again, this is my idea. I don't know if my fellow board members feel the same way or not, but So I see that Wendy is next, and then Steve and Diana.
Max, I agree with you on that one. I almost think that the specificity of that could probably even fall under the broader scope of number 3. If we're talking about if there's something about the process that is difficult or confusing or not lining up with where we want to be, then I think that can almost fall under these barriers and access issues. If there's something about the application itself and the process itself that could be changed to make it work for a broader, for the broader population, then that could be like a sub-objective of number 3 and doesn't necessarily need to be its own. So I like the overall focus about communication with the applicants and licensees, because that's how we know, that's how we learn, and that's how we continue to refine our processes going forward.
Wendy, I agree with you. I'm sorry if I interrupt. The only thing I would be careful to put everything in on number 3, otherwise it becomes a huge container. It risks to have the opposite effect of putting too much things, right? And so I agree with what you said. And to me, really erasing that last part will really give that broader sense. So that includes the benefits of establishing a relationship and communication that's more transparent and direct. So I just wanted to add that. So in case I was misunderstood, but thanks.
This is the co-facilitator. I just want to confirm, I initially deleted that last part, but I wanted to confirm with the board members that if it was okay for me to get rid of that last part of the sentence. So that was to reduce common application or licensing maintenance errors.
I think they're speaking, so we need to hear from them. There are a lot of raised hands.
It's fine with me. I think that made a lot of sense. Great point.
And then there is Kelly.
I'm just stepping away from my computer for a moment. My video is going to be off, but I'm connected to audio.
I do have a thought though, since so the question is, what is the benefit? I think the benefit is the successful navigation of the licensure process. So I mean, that's just my thought, but I think that's always our goal, is to increase and improve communication so people successfully navigate this process. So I think we can add that. At least that's my opinion.
I think also, Jonathan, it comes from a feedback from our community where there were a lot of complaints in the past years where licensee couldn't have access to the BBS. They wanted us to create more tools, which we did, the social media interactions, all the great things we did. I think that comment comes from that that urge that our community is experiencing in relations to having a positive, affirming communication, not just to avoid errors, but to improve the relationships overall, right? So I think it's better for all of us. So I agree with your statements, Jonathan, as well.
No, I would agree with you. I've been through it, so not going to throw the board under the bus, but
Can I interject really quick?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I interject? Yeah, this objectives was talking about the nuts and bolts communication where you have approval letters, you have communicating with licensees about deficiencies they had, kind of really speeding that up. We do have another part on the outreach that will kind of address the outreach to stakeholders and licensees and making sure we're communicating appropriately with them. But I think this objective was really talking about, like what can we do when you first come in the door and apply, or you submit a application of some sort. We want to, I think one of our goals in the next year or so is to have a plan in place where we're every step of the way they're being notified where your application's here, it's going to move on to here. It was really more kind of to address what can we do during that, if somebody submits an application, letting them know where that application is, and maybe being able to work with them more efficiently on those deficiencies that they might have, so we can get them through the process as fast as possible. That's what we have this for. And I guess, the addition in there to reduce application barriers, I think I pulled that from another strategic plan from another group, but it is it places that on the applicants. So I do agree that maybe it can be reworded. But I think this was really looking at the nuts and bolts of communicating during the application process or the renewal process. How do we let people know that we've received their payment? How do we let them know that we're actually processing it, so they don't have to be lost and not know where it's at. So that's where we're kind of was the thought for this objective was.
Thanks, Steve. And then there is Diana.
Yeah, my comment was actually just back up there to how to make that complete. So I was just saying to improve applicant understanding of requirements, but it looks like we've got it taken care of now.
And then Kelly. Kelly is not longer. Okay, sorry folks, I'm pushing through it. I see that it's 11 o'clock. Maybe we need even a break. We have to finish by 1. We have a lot of stuff to do, so I don't mean to be, but maybe a moderator, if you don't mind, I can also, since there is a lot of editing in the meantime, I can also help you to facilitate the timing.
Sure. If you'd like to, if the board members would like to take a break at this point, we can do that and put a pause. And then when we come back, we can continue with these objectives. I would like to reiterate that once again, this is kind of like a first draft, so we can do any wordsmithing or editing offline with Steve and the rest of the board members before it goes to like the official approval phase. So at this point, would you like to take a short 15-minute break? Yes.
Hey, Max, could we possibly just do number 5? It's the last one. Then when we come back, we can feel like we finished this and we're on a whole nother slide because, I hate to go on a break and come back and still look at the same slide.
Okay, I thought that
You mind?
okay, no, I don't. I mean, it wasn't just personal, so I want to make sure. Okay, let's finish with number 5. I think it makes more sense. And then we'll still have public input. So maybe after 5, we take a break and we come back with the public input. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Number 5.
All right. Any comments on number 5? I see hand raised from Christina.
I actually think that, that the develop video presentations, to understand the licensing to a certain extent, I think we can make, it's one of the, the method, to accomplish, the objective. So it seems to me that, that we can actually, sort of combine, the 4th and the 5th, if it's, just about, it's not, to me about the communication, it's not just about the initial, licensing, how to get to the examination, the licensing process, but also down the road, when applicants, have questions about like, how do I apply for retire license and that kind of stuff. And so I think that, improve communication and make the broad, make the, the information, for the licensees more transparent and easier to navigate. I think these are all, kind of like similar, so that's just my input.
Kelly.
Kelly actually left his hand up and then walked away, turned off his video, I think. That's what happened.
Yeah,
That's why
he
his
said
hand's
he's going to be gone for a while.
So Deborah.
I just want to say that it's really been nice working with you guys this morning, but I have to head out and teach a couple of classes. So I will not be joining you at 11 o'clock. I have to bug out, and I will see you at the next meeting.
Thank you, Deborah. Jonathan.
Max, I'm sorry, my mute was off. My mute was on, but I just wanted to say 5 is kind of a slam dunk. If you want to keep it as an independent objective, it would be very easily measurable. But if you want to stick it under 4, it does kind of flow into the applicant communication. It would be a very easily and measurable for Steve to do because you can pull the metrics online.
Yeah, I think we asked Steve to open a TikTok channel for that. Okay, just kidding. So then there is John.
No, I actually agree. I think that number 5 is actually an action item for number 4. So like where 4 is the objective, 5 is one of those goals, the action items to receive it that we actually would grade on and be, so I would actually like to remove it and turn it into an action item under 4.
Okay, and then we have Jonathan.
Yeah, actually, so I actually disagree with that because I think number 4 is inward facing toward what do we call them now? Associates, and to associates, while number 5 is actually reaching out toward maybe those who are considering a career in this field. And so I think number 5 distinctively speaks to people who may be on the fence or considering career options. I also think too, maybe it shouldn't be so specific to video presentations. Maybe it should just say develop resources. That way it broadens the scope and allows them to develop a video or get a TikTok channel or whatever they want to do, get on YouTube. It just broadens it and gives them more flexibility so that at the end of the year, we're not saying how many videos did you do versus how many resources did you do. But I think this one is distinctively different because it speaks to sort of maybe people who are, have a bachelor's degree in psychology and was like, hey, I didn't know I couldn't do nothing with this. Now what? That kind of thing.
So Jonathan, I know Steve is next. I didn't read it that way though. I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong. I thought the item 5 was actually again directed towards those perhaps AMT that are about to, deposit their hours, trying to figure out what's coming next, more than a promotional video towards those that are not even licensed or even thinking about it. I don't know, I might be wrong, but I was reading that as I also agree with putting a number 4 because I was reading it as a whole package about communication tools, but I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe it's both. I'm a both and kind of guy, so it can be both. I'm cool with that.
Steve, I know you want to, yeah.
Yeah, actually this one, the thought on this one was kind of talking to the applicant when they've actually applied. We do have, I believe I put in the outreach portion where we're actually looking at, how to outreach to, to the people out there, how, what to do with what they can do as a therapist, really coming up to, what I'm looking at is since we are license all these therapists, we should be able to kind of outreach to let people know what is a therapist, what does a therapist do, and trying to, do that more outreach in that aspect, even before you even consider going to get licensed. I want to put information out there where somebody doing a high school report on their future career can go in and say, oh, let me go to the BBS. This is great material. I want to become a therapist. So this one, I honestly would agree. It probably could be pushed up to 4. It would make more sense. But then the other one you're talking about, the outward facing, we do have that, I think, in the outreach portion. There's another one in there for that. So I think with licensing, what I'm focusing on is, the nuts and bolts of getting them through the process and into the actual having a license. So just my thoughts.
Thanks, Steve. That's always very helpful. Okay, moderator, I don't see any other comments. Deborah, no, Deborah's gone. Yeah, she left us, so I think I don't know why she's still logged in, but yeah.
And Elle, were you speaking?
No.
Yes, this is a co-facilitator. I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to get clarification here. So is this a last objective is going to be joined? Should I make a note that it should be incorporated to objective number 4?
Well, I don't mean to read the crowd, but I thought that was the intention of most of the speakers. But again, I know besides Jonathan had a different perspective. I'm okay either way.
Thank you for confirming that. And
sorry, based on what Steve said, I think it would flow under 4.
Well, and maybe this is Wendy. Maybe we could have Steve clarify because I guess my interpretation of Steve's comments were 4 being kind of focused on people that are already interested in the profession and how to move them through to licensure versus 5 being bringing helping more people understand this as a career path. So if that's the intent, then these could probably stay different, separate objectives. But Steve, maybe it would help provide some clarity for us here.
Yeah, no, number 4 is definitely not what we were talking about. And it's something that we're already almost kind of proceeding on, is the pathway to licensures. And this is, you received your master's degree. Now, how do you get licensed? It's not about kind of looking at trying to, go out into the community to say, here, this is who we license. This is what our licensees do. This is how, this could be a profession for you, or looking more towards the consumer or somebody who might be interested in the field. We have a separate one where I think we're addressing an outreach, is kind of increasing that kind of communication. This one is really for you need to get through the process with BBS. This is what you need to do. So.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So then, Kelly, it may be appropriate then to combine the two. I misunderstood the differences there. Thank you.
All right, and I see Kelly has his hand raised.
That's just what Wendy said what I was going to say.
Okay.
All right, and then we're all happy with these?
Yes.
All right. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and take a quick 15-minute break.
I would say, yeah, if we can come back 11:15, and maybe the members of the public can prepare so that when we come back, we can ask their feedback as well, right? Okay, so we're back 11:15.
The time is 11:15. I want to just confirm that we have all our board members back. I don't know if we want to go ahead and do another quick roll call.
This is Kelly.
Diana is here.
Chris Jones is here.
Max is here too.
Jonathan's here. I'm just working on my video.
John Sovek is here and ready to go.
Christina's here.
Nice.
That was a hell of a break, Jonah.
Yes.
All right, I think that was everyone. So at this point, we're going to go to public comment. All right, wonderful. So let me go ahead and open up the public comment. Members of the public, at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. If you would like to make a public comment on the suggested licensing objectives, please either click that Q&A button down at the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or click that raise hand icon that's going to be next to your name on the participant panel. At this point, I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to either access the Q&A panel and submit their requests, or raise their hand. And then I do have a request that we do ask that all the board members please turn on their video, just to make sure that we do still have a quorum. All right, so I do have a couple hands raised from attendees. So we're going to go in the order that they are listed. One moment while I get my timer ready. So Jennifer Alley, I'm going to request to unmute your microphone. You'll have 2 minutes to speak and a 15-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when it comes up. right, Jennifer, you are unmuted.
Good morning. This is Jennifer Alley with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, CAMP. I want to thank the board for their thoughtful discussion on the licensing objectives today. One issue that I was actually going to bring up in public comment later was a newer issue for CAMP that came up as a result of the telehealth conversations. And it deals with access for individuals with mobility challenges. And so as you talked about the various groups, underprivileged groups, you know, you talked about various communities. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight that one that, you know, when we talk about equitable access to increase the diversity of the workforce, that's just one population we don't want to be overlooked, as they may need individual flexibilities or variations as things move forward and change with the way that services are delivered and acquiring their license, their hours required for their licenses when they're associates. So thank you. That's it.
All right, this is the moderator, and I have a hand raised from Tracy Montez. Tracy, I will be requesting to unmute your microphone now. All right, and you are unmuted.
This is Tracy Montez, Division Chief of Programs and Policy with the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I just wanted to share with you and remind you that one of the ways that you do address barriers to licensure is by following Section 139 of the Business and Professions Code, which requires all of our boards to review their examinations and ensure that they are fair, valid, and legally defensible. Your board has a long history of doing occupational analyses, exam development, and being very rigorous in ensuring that your exams are fair. We also, through our Office of Professional Examination Services, audit or review the national exam programs for your board to ensure, again, fairness and transparency. So I just wanted to remind you that you do that again for your newer board members. So you are very proactive, and this is certainly something that can be reported in the EO evaluation. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and that appears to be all of our requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
All right, the Q&A panel is now closed.
And I also wanted to thank Tracy for that comment as well. So thank you so much for the reminder and the objectivity of that. So thank you. So I think we can move to the next objectives. Am I right?
That is correct. One moment while I go ahead and get the presenter status for my co-facilitator. My co-facilitator will be kind of facilitating this next section, and I will be doing the scribing.
Wonderful.
So one moment while I get that up.
Elizabeth, and I will be facilitating this next goal area, which is examination. And we have the goal area statement on the screen for you to reference and to use as guidance as you are reviewing the suggested objectives and drafting additional ones if you're interested. The summary is on pages 17 through 23 if you need to reference them, and the raw comments are on pages 130 through 174. And would you like a moment to look at the summaries, or would you like to proceed with the suggested objectives?
I think we can move forward to the suggestions, and so we can go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will give you a moment, a couple minutes to review the suggested objectives, and then I will go in order through each objective and get your feedback, any refinements. And then we'll move on to, if you would like to develop additional objectives, you can do that as well. So I will pause for a moment and give you a couple minutes to review the objectives that we have up on the screen.
Okay.
Thank you. And just as a friendly reminder, the strategic plan is a guiding document. It's a document that will assist the executive team and staff with their daily efforts and efforts to address issues that were identified in the environmental scan. So moving on, we will start with suggested objective number 1. Would you like me to read it off, or would you like to start with any comments?
I will go straight with any comment. And perhaps if we can try a new way, moderator, I hope I don't step into your role, but I think to create the fluidity of the conversation among board members, we can really, I can see all, usually when we have board meetings, you know, they can raise their hands on the video and see who wants to talk. We can speed up the process without penalizing the conversation. So they, you know, the whole raising hands feature, it's definitely good, but it could slow down the process and everything else. So I would like to make sure that we are having a fluid conversation, if that's okay with a fellow board members, so that we can actually all participate if we need to and move along faster as well.
Thank you for the suggestion. Just the limitation might be for me. I am looking at the videos from a line at the top of my screen here, which is the best layout for me as a facilitator. So that might limit my ability to see people that raise their hands physically in front of the video camera. May I suggest?
I can do that though. I can call people out.
Oh, thank you.
I don't mean to say I can call people out, but yeah, I can call people out.
Awesome. Think that will work as well. Thank you. So we can proceed that way.
Let's try that way if it is any easier or faster. So otherwise we go back to the other method.
Sure. And another suggestion, just in case we want to find another way of facilitating this, is if you would like to go in order by first or last name, each calling on each board member to see if they have any feedback. And then
No, I'm afraid it's too formal. Really, I would like to avoid the formality of the conversation so that we can brainstorm and think, say things and go back to the things we say. So it's more fluid, in my opinion, than just going from left to right, you know, and okay. I would like to, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for understanding. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
So we're at objective number 1. If there are any questions, any concerns that anyone would like to speak to from my fellow board members.
I do see that Jonathan Maddox's hand is up.
Yeah, so I think this has been mentioned earlier. I think it was mentioned by Kelly that the term cultural competency is no longer a viable term. And so I think what this is asking, and you know, I'm open to feedback and or correction, that this is saying that we would work with exam developers to have items on the test that demonstrate our ability to work with diverse cultures and races. I mean, that's the way I read it. And so if that's the case, I think that could be reworded to say something like work with examination developers to ensure examinations. And you don't have to type it because this is just me. I mean, this is a conversation. Including competencies for culturally responsive care, as opposed to cultural competency, because a cultural competency is a myth. It doesn't really exist. So that's my thought. I'm done.
Right. Thanks, Jonathan. I saw Sue raising her hands. Sue?
In addition to dealing with the cultural question, I think number 1 and number 4 could be combined. Makes sense. Have the people who are the experts make sure that they have the exam correctly, dealing with cultural differences, etc.
Are you referring, Susan, I'm sorry, are you referring to number 5 and 4 now?
No, 1 and 4.
Oh, 1 and 4. Okay, that's why I was confused. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Anyone would like to speak to that? I saw Kelly and then Stephen.
So yeah, I was going to change competencies to responsiveness, and so you could take that entire back 3 words and just go work with examination developers to ensure the examinations are culturally responsive and address diverse populations, something akin to that, keeping in mind that John Sovik's definition of diverse populations includes LGBT populations, sexual orientation, age, disability, special needs, etc.
Thank you. And before we move forward with any additional suggestions, I would like to get some feedback on the refinements that were just made to this objective.
I know there is Steve and then Christina Wong. Go ahead, Steve.
Just to comment on Susan's, Susan, that's a good suggestion too, because really what, when we're working to develop the examinations, what we really do want is get that really large group of subject matter experts from everywhere. So I think that would fall within one I've seen, as that would be one of the tasks for that. Just a thought.
Okay, and then there was Christina Wong. Thank you, Steve. Christina?
And I totally agree with it, because number one is actually, you cannot measure that, because the bottom line is that all the examination development, it's a very, very lengthy process. And so, so this is within, this is not something that, even like a group of people, I mean, okay, put it this way. If you ask the vendor, say like ASWB, do you have questions that are culturally responsive and address the diverse population? They would say yes, absolutely. And then what? Right? And then what? So I think, really it's about, the better method is to make sure that we have enough, representation, or, be able to represent what California is, and be able to participate in the examination development, so that, they can also speak for, what California is about. And yet, I think this is, of course, the downfall of taking the national examination, especially, for the clinical part of it, it has to address across all nations. So I think, what we have in control really is about the law and ethics examination. How can we actually, when we develop those examination that, the subject matter expert or the writing, the examination writer are being able to incorporate, those the cultural items, in helping, the licensees or the examinees, to think about, in more on the cultural diverse context, when they make those ethical and legal decisions. So I think the bottom line is that, that I think combining the 1 and 4 would be good.
Okay, thank you, Christina. And John Savak?
And grabbing hold of that idea, because I think the actual pool of subject matter experts is an important part of this. What if in the combination it read something like, identify and implement strategies to increase the diversity of subject matter experts and develop examinations that are culturally responsive and address diverse populations. So that does give us something that is measurable on 2 levels. Both that we're finding the strategies that are bringing this pool, and then we're expecting that pool to create these questions that are more appropriate for the years ahead.
This is the facilitator. Thank you, John. If you can repeat that once again slowly so I can have Sarah type and finish the objective here. So that was identify and implement strategies to increase diversity of SMEs.
And to ensure that examinations are culturally responsive and address diverse populations.
Ensure that examinations are culturally responsive and address diverse populations.
Thank you. I can type fast, but not that fast.
I know, I talk fast.
Thank you. So I believe the feedback that I'm getting is replacing what was originally objective number 1 with that identify, implement strategies. Are you okay with removing that, the work with examination developers, and just leave it at the second statement there below? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I like that statement, John. That's actually, very, I like it a lot.
Thank you.
I think it's good and measurable. Yeah.
Sorry, if you can repeat that, I wasn't able to hear.
Right, Steve. Steve, can you repeat? We couldn't hear.
I said I think it's good and measurable.
Thank you. Thank you for
I was
confirming that.
joking. Okay.
Okay.
I don't see any other raised hands, but if you have any comments, please jump in from my fellow board members. Anything else you would like to add to number 1, which is already revised? Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I believe we can. Oh,
I apologize.
no, don't. I apologize if I'm going too fast, but
No worries. So we're moving on to our next suggested objective here, which is streamline the interfaces between the board and exam vendors. So if any feedback, please
I have a
raise your
question.
hand.
I'm
Yes.
having a hard time really understanding what this means. So maybe someone can help me to explain that. I really don't understand it. I saw Steve raising his hands. Steve?
Yeah, this is really an administrative goal. That's why it's kind of confusing. You're like, what in the heck are they talking about? But so what we have interfaces, meaning the interfaces when we send our eligibilities over to the different exam vendors and how we relate the scores of the applicants back into the system. There's definitely room for improvement and things we wanted to venture into to try to work on. Currently right now we have, we work with ASWB and NBCC, but we have to go through kind of like there's a third party that gets involved. So we're looking at possibly, or I would like to explore the idea of, direct links with their exam vendor, which is Pearson VUE. And basically what the benefit of that would be that it would cut down some of the staff work in getting eligibilities over to these entities. But then at the same time, once an exam candidate passes the exam or fails or just takes the exam, there's going to be more of an immediate back and forth between our systems, so we can actually speed up the process for them, on towards licensure. And it would, relieve some of the confusion we have with working with some of these vendors. Honestly, yes, it's an administrative goal. Yeah.
So Steve, I have a question. I trust yours and the staff motivation for this to be here, and because I'm sure you can make it trackable in the outcomes, measurable, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel like that. So for us as board members, how can we support you and the staff in relations to in adding this in the strategic plan? What can we do also to make sure that it's a process that the board can, because it seems very administration, which is very important too. So is it really the right place to put it on or not? I mean, I just want to be fair about the process, also not to interfere with what administrative tasks that the staff might take on that are not directly related to major objectives. But again, because I don't know much about it, so I'm asking you if you feel that.
It's either or. It's kind of being selfish. Once again, it's for me to have something out there on the strategic plan that we can actually, it inspires. I don't know what the right term would be, but it definitely keeps us revisiting this to make sure that we are proceeding on with this. It's administrative. We can do it in the background. It's kind of a daily routine, but I think in the end, it could actually, show that there could be some great progress that we would like to share that we might not usually share if it's not in the strategic plan, because it just goes on to daily business. So I think it's honestly, yes, if it's not in the strategic plan, it wouldn't be that, it's not one of those objectives that we could get rid of it. Honestly.
I only say that, I don't know if my board members can also chime in, but I don't want to open an exception because we don't put administrative task into a strategy plan. And also I want to make sure that the public understand what we're talking about, because we need to remember, as you know, that strategic plans are not just for the board and the staff, but also for the public to understand what the directions we're taking. So I want to make sure that every item is understood, the function of it. There's not just a language in there. So I'll leave it up to you, and then I see Christina Wong chiming in on this. I don't, yeah.
So I'm actually thinking that, maybe, I'm thinking about like the processing time, it has been taken, quite a long, and, so there are many steps for them, for the associate to be able to, get their license. So what about you just establish a goal, something like improve the examination process to ensure the to ensure the expedience licensing, something like that. So something along that line, pretty broad, but you also open up, different, possibility of measurements. Say you reduce, their the time, to get them eligible, to work with the vendor, to shorten the time, when the score that, from the vendor to, the board and be able to issue the license, something like that. And then I think there are a lot of different things that you can play around with.
Mhm. That makes a lot more sense, actually.
Right. So, so I'm not really wordsmithing, that, but it's really along the line about like improving the examination process to, for the associate to get their license.
That sounds good.
The facilitator.
I can definitely wordsmith that with you, but I think, yeah, I mean, that makes more sense. Process for the proof examination process for the, I mean, we could put it at that. Let me look at that, and I know where you're coming, but that makes more sense as a goal.
And it's also more it's also more clear for the reader, for the public, and the licensee what the intent is of that scope. Anyone else would like to say anything about this?
So I can actually, probably help out, improve the examination process, for, from the application of examination to obtaining their license. Something like that.
And what would be the benefit if you would like to suggest one at this time? I know that it will be wordsmith offline, but if you would like to suggest any benefits for doing for improving the process.
Can I make an improved examination process for all candidates to ensure, I don't know, and I don't want it expedited, to ensure, I don't know.
I was thinking about that word expediting or something like that.
I'll figure that, yeah.
Yes, but you know what I mean. Yes.
To ensure timely, we can say licensure or process. I mean, it could be licensure, we could say on that, because it does, some of them, I mean, it is a step in licensure, but I'll probably have to wordsmith that. It's a little bit more, but I can see reading. So
I think to answer the moderator question is because sometimes it does take a longer time, because, there are times that, like the LMFT, or the AMFT applicants right now is taking, quite a while. So there are many points that it could go wrong. So whether it's the internal approval process or, dealing with the vendor, that process, so we want the people to get license. And so the more that the licensees are able to practice independently, then we can actually, ensure, those associates, are able to provide the competent mental health practice. So that's the benefit of it.
Thank you. And we captured the benefit here in the objective.
Can we add the word equity there? Because I think equity needs to be an intentional word that we sort of permeate throughout this document, just so that we're making sure that we're not just moving faster, but that we're moving faster and more efficient for everyone. Because what may benefit one particular group may disadvantage another. So I think we need to have conversations about not just timely access, but timely and equitable access, so that we're considering the range of diversity of people who might be trying to access these tests and things of that nature.
Can I make a comment on that? I think that's a really good addition, and I think that actually that objective really, it takes in number 5. I think that the equity statement, I think really that kind of captures that number 5, and it does make it a really robust objective. That would be my suggestion, is to kind of include 5 as a note saying, yes, that maybe when we're wordsmithing our asks and stuff, let's look at that. But that, I like that. My opinion, not the board's.
This is a facilitator. Any additional, or actually, let me ask, is there any comments or feedback in regards to the changes that have been made to objective number 2? So what originally was streamline the interfaces between the board and exam vendors is now improve examination process for all candidates to ensure timely and equitable access to licensure. Is there any opposition to that new objective that came out of the original one? No, any refinements? Okay. And any comments or feedback in regards to consolidating objective number 5, which was assess, the accessibility of exams and accommodation needs of test takers? Can that be incorporated into or by adding equitable access to that that new objective under number 2? So I guess I should rephrase my question here. Is it okay to incorporate objective number 5 to our new version of objective number 2? Any oppositions to that? And Max, if I can't see any of the hands that may be up physically.
Yeah. No, nobody's, no, yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, so we can cross out number 5. We have incorporated it to that second objective by adding a little bit of language in there. So are we good with number 2? Can we strike out streamline, the sentence that contains the streamline? Okay.
Looks like yes.
Okay, so unless anyone would like to add anything else, we will move on to the next objective.
Yeah, we're ready for number 3.
I think I saw a hand go up. Kelly.
Kelly?
This is just a grammatical suggestion, but I would change the use of the word consider to evaluate. I mean, consider is sort of generic, you know. I consider such and such, it's a yes or no, but evaluate seems to provide more analytical things, and it would probably be better for a measurable index.
Thanks, Kelly. Anyone else on this? I see John Savek. And you're muted.
I was trying to be so polite and respectful. Okay. So yes, consider, I think, is a very soft and unevaluable word. But I actually want to check in with Steve about the writing of this, because it feels like this was in the previous plan. Doesn't necessarily feel like anything actually happened on it. If we look at what you sent out with all of the information, a lot of our stakeholders saying, can we please push this national exam in place, because it will help us to have portability of our license, and it will address a lot of issues about working across state lines. So I think considering and evaluating is still incredibly passive. There doesn't seem to be an action plan to actually say, yes, we can do this, or no, we don't. And because it was in the previous strategic plan, and that was a 4-year plan, and there's still no kind of yay or nay or moving forward that I've heard of, I would like to suggest that this needs to be a slightly more aggressive objective, so that it doesn't just become a passive process, which it feels like it's been over the last 4 years.
So what about, thank you, John. What about like something along the lines of pursuing the steps for implementation? So pursuing, you know, whatever it's better to, it's an action that shows that we are looking into, because obviously we're not approving it here, but we're looking to pursuing the steps to implementations of the blah, blah, blah. So that could perhaps, would that resonate with what you're saying in terms like putting an action into it?
I do like the way that's going, but I also maybe want to see if Steve has any feedback for us, like that would help us understand what he would need on his end that would make it something that we could measure, that we could really say, we want you to push this even harder than it's been pushed in the past, and just see from him what his feedback on this might be. Steve, take it away.
Yes, and currently, actually, this is in action. OPES is actually beginning the process of looking at the exam again. which we've done before in the past. And so where it's stopped though is when it's gotten to the board, and it hasn't moved forward. So what, I mean, I don't know how to really craft that. Is you will be presented next year sometime with a report on, the AMFTRB exam. And so at that point, that will be your decision, to look at that and to, figure out if we want to proceed on with using that for our the licensure exam. So, I mean, I don't know, because you haven't really, we're in the process of it, so you can't really say adopt the AMFTRB exam.
How about review and report on the feasibility of? Report out on the feasibility of.
That's good. I think it's one of the steps though, because we're getting the report, the board will have to have the board discussion, and then we'll have to put forward legislation to get that adopted in. So,
but I guess, and maybe I misheard, I think what I heard you say was that it's at the board level. So I don't know if you mean us, the board, or like the agency. It's somewhere stalled right now.
It would be at you guys, our board. The board would have to make a decision and vote to say we want to proceed on with using this as a licensure exam, and then we would have to do the work to get that going.
Okay. Can I ask another just clarifying question?
Hmm?
Is it just the MFT board? I know the LCSWs have a national test. Has that already been resolved, or would that roll into this also?
Yeah, we currently accept the ASWB exam, the clinical exam. So really, it's and also for LPCCs, we take the national exam there. So really, it's just MFTs are not within the national exam. So.
Then, with that said, would that go back to the goal under licensing around sort of aligning all the different license types? I mean, would this be a duplication of that, or should it be its own thing because it really needs to move forward? That would be a question.
I kind of want. I was thinking. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying we mentioned it on the previous slide about aligning all the license types.
I think it really does need to be a separate one because it is a pretty major decision that needs to be made, or yay or nay on that. So. I agree with the evaluate is not, maybe pursue the use of, and then that kind of we're pursuing, but not necessarily, you may look at it and see that it's not valid and we can go from there, but maybe pursue the use of the AMFTRB exam.
Would it be logical to say like develop the process of implementation?
Well, because the implementation is really, the decision will be made, then we have to craft to make sure that's in our legislation, and then we'll work with AMFTRB to figure out the contractual obligations and do that. So,
can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
So I personally, even though it is a duplicated goal, but I think the word evaluate is actually very appropriate because in the sense that, that in the last 4 years, the board has done tremendous amount of work, to involve different, different parties, to really evaluate their appropriateness. And it was one of the results that, that because of how the nature of the national exam, then it is not able to move forward. So before we actually, use the word more vigorous to adopt or to, to pursue, it seems to me that, you're kind of like ignoring, some of the factors, of the appropriateness. So I think, the real first step is really to evaluate, and to really see if it is comparable, because I think that, in California, when we have, like 75% or, right around the number of the national MFTs, actually the national exam becomes, may or may not be more applicable, to specifically California. And so I would actually be a little more conservative and, use the word, evaluate, instead of, be more, on the vigorous side, that, so that we don't promise anything.
Okay, John Savak.
So, Christina, I would like to respectfully disagree with you. I believe we have been doing a lot of evaluation, a lot of exploration. And once again, it has been a goal that's been on the boards for a long time. I think if we stay in this evaluation mode, we'll end up in another 4 years with potentially no action having been taken. You know, maybe it's looking at reconcile the use of. So we look at what are the things that work and what don't do, because reconcile is like an actionable item that we can look at. I just believe this evaluate is once again moving us into such a passive stance that at the end of 4 years, we'll probably have no motion on this. And I think when we look at all of that information we got back from all of the stakeholders, especially, so many of them commented about that we've got the highest standards and yet we can't go to other states without having to do jump through huge things to get licenses in other states. So this addresses a little bit of the portability question. And we saw myriad responses in that big report that said this is a really frustrating thing, especially for the LMFTs. And so I think the time of passive evaluation has passed. And I would like to really push Steve a little bit more to make this a very active priority.
Stephen?
How about we say decide on the use? I mean, decide's not a great word, but something to that effect.
Well, and the reason I threw out the word reconcile is I opened up my big thing of like SMART goal adjectives. And there isn't one that seems to fit exactly. And maybe the facilitators who work in SMART goals a lot have been hearing the conversation and maybe have some more action adjectives that we could use there. But even the idea of reconcile says we're taking what we know, we're taking what the national exam has now, and how can we bring those together? I'm just trying to like find something that has an action to it versus just, well, let's look, you know?
I agree. I also agree with.
No, John makes a great point. Sorry to just, because I don't know how to raise my hand. I changed.
It's okay, Jonathan. Go ahead. We're talking.
So I agree with John 100%. I mean, we clearly need to have some language that actually is proactive and assertive. So I'll go back to my self-serving statement. So what about review and report on the feasibility of adopting? Because that's really what John's talking about. We're talking about, let's review it again. Let's make sure that it actually is comparable and should be implemented in the state, make a decision, and then go forward. I mean, because review and report on adopting it sounds pretty proactive to me. We don't have to use those words, but I'm just curious, is there a problem with that? Just for the sake of agreement.
So Steve, I want to just go back to, you know, what we have done before. Didn't we actually have the review and report component by actually, you know, is Dr. Montez, you know, that's a service, you know, so we actually have done that part of it. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, I'm going to be off the board, you know, you guys will be the one who, you know, who deal with this issue. But really, I think, you know, the reason why we cannot adopt that way back when was really about the incompatibility. You know, there's a lot of the issues, you know, so it's not that we, you know, I think way, you know, when it was presented way back when, the national exam itself has a lot of the issue. So I think as compassionate that we try to, you know, try to help the license portability, you know, that I think we have to also respect the fact that, you know, that we have to find ways to make sure that, you know, our consumers are protected, you know, and, you know, our standard, you know, of the examination is up to par. You know, so one of the problem is like, you know, if they're still using paper and pencil, you know, and we're using computer, you know, that is itself is a very, very big issue. So I think, you know, whether the lingo is, I'm fine with it, you know, but I just want to be very clear that, you know, that to leave a room for the board not to promise that, you know, that adopting the national examination is the way to go. So that's just my bottom line, and then I'll leave you guys to decide on the wordsmithing.
So Christina, I think Max here. I think then it's fair that also because we have a new composition of board members, I think it's fair that this report and conversation evaluation is brought back to the board with, you know, perhaps things have changed, because otherwise having it in a strategic plan where we already know that there was not an intent from the board to approve it, it's very misleading. It also creates not a fair approach to the issue. So I suggest that it needs to be here with the action words that John was proposing, so they can then, you know, our staff can come back to us with all those challenges that we addressed a few years ago, some of which might be gone now, or maybe some are even worse. So we can reevaluate the overall package about where we are and why perhaps the board has to take a clear stand about not moving forward, or maybe the opposite. So, because otherwise, if we have it there, but there is an intention not to adopt it, I don't think it's right. It's just evaluating for evaluating. It's not productive, which I know is not what you're suggesting. But we have a new board. I think we need to do that work and come back to the board so that we can have the tools in place to evaluate that again. So I evaluate an action on that again. So
How about reevaluate? You just said that. I like that. So
well,
you know,
I'm concerned though that reevaluation, Christina, I'm concerned though to speak to the concern also, John, and I don't mean to speak for you, John, is that kind of like reperpetuating a state of doing nothing that I don't think we need to reevaluate, but also to see what kind of actions we can take to adjust the possible, to see if it's feasible or not, you know, to go back to that. But I know, Steve, you were something.
Yeah, so the report is being done and you'll receive that in spring. So this
Right.
objective would be over, which is fine with me. I'm happy with that because I can mark that off. But I think I would like to see this as kind of pushing it more forward, as in, let's then really look at the final decision on, are we going to move forward with this or not? So I think that, you know, would be a better objective with review and evaluate, which is good. But the component of, let's make a decision on that. Yeah, are we going forward? Are we not? That doesn't mean that as we go through the evaluation process, we'll see that, oh, they don't really, you know, address this in the exam. Is there a way maybe we can figure things out to reconcile with the MFTRB to say maybe you can work with our subject matter experts more or something? But kind of like, let's make a decision. I think that component needs to be in there because this objective, the report's coming to you in the springtime sometime. So,
okay,
yeah.
John and
Just
Kelly.
So maybe it's the idea of using Jonathan's language, which I think is spot on, but change it to review, report, and reconcile the feasibility. So that way we're getting the report and then we're sitting down and we're reconciling what are the things that work, what are the ones that don't, and then we can find a plan going forward to pursue or not pursue. And I think that kind of covers what Steve just said.
This is the facilitator. I want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to contribute here. But first, I would like to ask if we can remove or strike out the first statement, reconcile on the use, and then the second one, pursue the use of, and leave the third version so we can work off of. Is that okay?
Yeah, that I think that's what's reflecting the conversation.
Thank you. And I did see that Roseanne had her hand up. Were you able to get your question answered, or would you like to contribute to the objective, Roseanne?
I think that we've kind of moved on. I think John's suggestion was a good one. I would just reiterate that the objective shouldn't imply one way or the other what the decision is going to be, because that could be misleading to the stakeholders before they actually know what the decision is. They could feel that it's going to go one way or the other, when really in the past, the board, the exam is being evaluated right now, and there will be action taken by the board when it's considered. But I don't think it's appropriate to imply the action one way or another, just because there have been serious concerns in the past. Doesn't mean that those have not been reconciled, but the board needs to consider that before going forward any further.
Roseanne, and I do see that Kelly, you have your hand up, but before we move on to you, I wanted to ask the board president, and actually the member of the public lowered their hand, but there was a member of the public that had hand up. If this would be an appropriate time to call on the individual. There were a representative of the department actually.
I will, since we're almost done with this objective and now we open to the public, so we don't go back and forth and opening and closing to the public, I would like to finish with, I know Kelly had something to say, and then when we finish with this, we can go to the public. Is that correct, Kelly, or not?
Yeah, no, the only thing I was just going to say is if you want to make it stronger, I would use Steve's language, which was decide. So you could implement it as review, report, and decide versus reconcile. It's entirely, I'd leave it up to the board, because decide would turn it into a yes or no, which is the way Steve phrased it. Again, I would defer to my other MFC board members.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there anyone else on this? Okay, moderator, then I would like to open to the public so we can see if there are any other feedbacks for all those items that we worked on the slides. And thank you.
Thank you. This is the moderator, members of the public. If you would like to participate in public comment for the goal area of examinations, please click, oh, and actually let me open it. I apologize. It is now open. You can click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. The instructions are currently on the screen for your reference. And in the Ask field, type comment and click Send to all panelists. And when prompted, click the Unmute Me button. We also have the other option of raising your hand, and that will raise your hand if you can see your name on the panelist list. The hand raise feature should be next to your name. Or if you're audio only participant, you can press *3 to raise your hand. And I'm going to set up my alarm here, my stopwatch. We have 2 minutes. And Jennifer Alley, I will be requesting to unmute your microphone now.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Alley with CAMP, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I think, again, this has been a really thoughtful conversation, and I just want to state that CAMP fully supports, the review, report, and decide goal for the National Marriage and Family Therapist exam. We really hope that the decision is yes, and we look forward to working with the board next year and in the spring to pursue that goal. So thank you.
Thank you. I do have a representative that had their hand up, said their comment was addressed. Thank you for letting us know. No additional requests have been submitted. Let me double check here on my screens. Board President, would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you.
Now has been closed. Thank you. And going back to the objectives, one last call, board members, any additional refinements to the suggested objectives?
I see John.
Okay, I know I'm the one who's pushing for aggressive action, but I have a quick question about the word decide. So decide means we have yes or no. And what I'm wondering is we get this information and then we examine and say like, okay, let's go back to AMFRB and say we need these things to be covered. We are one of the largest population of LMFTs in the country. Does that give us things to try and negotiate with them to help them change their exam over time to make it more applicable to us? So decide, for me, puts a yes or no answer into it. And maybe the reconciliation thing is, okay, let's look at this report. What are the differences? Where can we start coming together? Do we have our own L&E exam and then use the national as a separate thing? I know it sounds like I'm backtracking. I'm not. I'm just trying to create more room for this to be something that is a growth-oriented thing rather than just a black and white decision.
Anyone else on this? Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to, so I think speaking to John's earlier point about, being time responsive in a timely manner to our stakeholders, while I like what he just described, I think we should make a decision about whether or not we're going to adopt it. And then if we're going to do the other piece, which my guess is going to be a marathon conversation, then we do that after we've decided yay or nay. So that stakeholders have clear direction about what they can expect over the next few years. And if we decide to do the secondary piece of collaborating on whether or not they could change it, we just do that offline so that our stakeholders aren't left hanging while we engage in a very laborious process.
What about endeavor to adopt instead of reconcile? I mean, it kind of still has a lot of work, maybe there might be a lot of work that we endeavor to adopt. Is the final goal would be to adopt sometime, maybe within the next 4 years, I mean, maybe in the next couple of years.
This is the facilitator, so I am hearing an endeavor to adopt. Is there any opposition or any comments on that change or suggested change?
We actually don't know. We actually don't know if we want to endeavor to adopt. We don't have the report.
Right.
True.
I agree.
So
you know,
leave
maybe
and decide.
reconcile was the best word. You know, I'm just saying, I said decide because I was kind of paralleling Steve's language. Reconcile might just be the best word that we use. So.
Any comments on the word? Thank you, Kelly. Any comments on the word reconcile or any other suggestions on that? I do see that a member of the public has their hand up, and since we have made changes, it might be proper to request for public comment again. But before we move on, so we don't come back and forth, unless you decide to do so, coming back and forth from public comment, I would like to open it up to any additional objectives. So these were suggested objectives, but I want to give the board members opportunity if you want to create any new or additional objectives under the goal area of examination. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands from the hand raise feature. Okay.
Good.
And would you like me to open up for public comment so we can take the hand that is currently raised?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So members of the public, we are opening up public comment once more. Again, the instructions will be on your screen shortly. If you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type comment and send it to all panelists. For those that are calling in, you can raise your hand by clicking *3. And Tracy Montez, your hand is up. I will be unmuting you in just a moment, and you do have 2 minutes. And I mean, I sent the request to unmute you.
Thank you. Again, Tracy Montez, Division Chief, Programs and Policy Review. How about using the word determine feasibility? So, Elle, can I see the screen again for the objective, if possible? So review, report, and determine feasibility. Because OPS will provide you a report that's going to have the strengths and the weaknesses of the program, and then a series of recommendations to support either the decision to utilize the exam or reasons not to. And in the past, we have seen that AMFRB has moved closer each time we've done these audits to meet expectations for California. So we do see progress, which is why it's really important to evaluate this regularly. So certainly that could then incorporate a series of follow-ups where the board may say, okay, this is great. You know, we like these aspects. We want to continue moving forward. Give us some timelines on how to meet each of those recommendations. For example, continuous testing, which has been an ongoing concern. Right now in California, you can test daily. With the national, there are only windows of testing. So I'm just, again, a possible suggestion: review, report, and determine feasibility of adopting the use ... Thank you.
And no further requests have been submitted. No additional hands have been raised. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature? And I believe you're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And so the suggestion was review, report, and determine. Board members, would you like to consider that suggestion? Any comments?
I can live with that. I think this is actually, more, it's a little broader. So we're not promising anything, but, but address the action, in the more concrete terms. So I think this is good.
Other board members? Thank you, Christina.
John, are you okay with that? Okay. Then it looks like there are no other comments on this.
Thank you. So we will move on to the next goal area, and I'll pass it on to my to the facilitator, Sarah, to facilitate the next goal area.
Thank you.
All right, one moment while we switch presenter roles. All right, so our next goal area is enforcement, which is described as protect the health and safety of consumers through enforcement of laws. The summary on the environmental scan will be on pages 24 to 30, and then those raw comments on pages 176 to 204. I believe we're gonna just go ahead and jump straight into those suggested objectives.
Yes.
Yep, which are right here. I'll give you a quick moment to look them over, and then we'll start off with number 1. All right, so we'll start off with that first one, develop and implement an effective communication process from open to close of a case to better inform applicants, complainants, and respondents. Do we have any additions we want to add to this objective, or do we believe we can live with how it currently is?
I just have a question for our staff and see Max here. So yeah, the intent is clear. I just wonder, is it enough to create measurables on this? Like for instance, develop and implement an effective communication process from open to close. What is any perhaps that they don't have to be written down, but anything to clarify what could be an example of that in the action? Because I know there are some jurisdictions that we don't cover in regards to some of the enforcement that is really beyond our own intervention. So how is the staff looking at this? And if it speaks to you, and maybe it can help me to understand a little bit more. Steve.
Yeah, once again, it's one of these administrative things that we can always improve upon. I mean, currently we do, reach out, but it's looking at, once again, what resources we have to utilize to ensure that the people that are going through the enforcement process are getting consistent, on-time information about where they stand. There's, utilizing electronics more, and email, looking at how we can actually actually present them with documents that are legally defensible electronically. Other ways, just kind of, there is measures, because we can say what we're doing now, which is really paper heavy, or how we're reaching out to probationers and stuff, and we can definitely make measures as to steps we're taking to increase that. It's one of those things, again, though, is we're always going to be looking at, but it might be nice to keep on there just so we can keep it as a goal to keep increasing the communication. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, thank you. It does make sense. I'm a little bit confused about the boundaries of because as you know, when we interact with the office of when we are actually, we're doing enforcement, we have specific roles that we apply to it, but then also there is an intervention that doesn't belong to the board. So I wasn't clear about, if we are creating, because this is now speaking to the public, it's not just an internal message on stuff. I don't know if it's creating illusions that we actually can the effective communication process from the board, it's obviously it's our objective to do, but also there is sometimes the complaints come from the fact that there is not a clear process in, you know, when other institutions come in, right? The actual AJ of, I mean, everything that has to do with that we have no control over. So it kind of, I don't know.
And that's what
Maybe
I'm looking at. I mean, maybe there's like things like that. There's ways we can communicate to the respondent saying, currently right now it's at the AG's office and this is what's happening there. You know, kind of
Okay.
just to make sure they don't get lost and it's like, what is happening? Especially also with probationers, looking at ways we can make some of the quarterly reports, make it easier to give us information and where they are at. So that's kind of what we're looking at. It's really board to the respondent, not, and maybe we could communicate like where they are, not necessarily with the AG and stuff, but I mean, just to make sure that they know, not just where they're sitting there scratching their head wondering where their case is. Or like if an applicant actually, an applicant comes in and has to go to an enforcement process, we make sure that we're consistent on giving them updates or status updates on this is what's happening, you know, so they don't, you know, they're not lost as to how long it's going to take them to possibly get their application approved or denied. So that's what I'm looking at on this one.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. As anyone else in the board, any questions, or we can also move on, or any, we don't have to change everything. So if this is okay, we can move on. And okay, I don't
I'm
believe.
not seeing any.
Yeah.
Yep, not seeing any hands raised. So in that case, oh, I see hand raised from Christina. Christina, you are muted.
Yes, yes, sorry about that. It's a lot of screen to, to juggle. So I wonder, in that sense, so Steve, I'm more looking at the words. It's like, so what do you want to communicate with? For what? For what? Develop, I'm just thinking develop and implement an effective communication process from open to close of a case to better inform client what? Inform what? The process of
The
this
status of their case.
something, yeah, something like
Yeah.
that, because I think if you can, if you can give us, the, it would be clearer.
I just had a really quick comment or statement. I don't
Yeah,
know.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Like, Steve, I actually really appreciate, I think we've talked about this in other meetings, just how advanced you've helped the BBS become electronically. And maybe even like doing something electronic when it comes to like, even like a simple email saying like, your status is updated and you're now at this point. And it could come from the same area where we do all of our, where we have to pay our fees and stuff, where you renew. Because I feel like that platform is so easy to use. And if you're like in trouble with the BBS, you could go on there and be like, oh, where am I at? Are there any updates? Because I do think that sometimes we get like people with when they're in the midst of that process, and they'll say in part of their report will say like, I never got that in the mail, or that's why I didn't respond to the BBS, or all that stuff. So I don't know if that, and then I was even thinking like a phone call. I know that's actually really crazy, but like an automated phone call of some sort that like tells them something. I just think those are like simple things, because people's addresses do change and they do forget to like update their addresses. I know that's like their responsibility, but just saying, like, right, consumer protection is part of that too. But anywho, I just had those tiny little comments. I wanted to say great job on the platform, but I think we can use that platform for more ways.
So how about developing and implement effective communication process from open to close of a case to ensure applicants, complainants, and respondents. Oh, I had it. Sorry. Never mind. I lost it. Yeah.
I think the way it was actually, we were missing the subject because Christina was looking for it. There was no subject, even though we knew what you intended, but it wasn't clear.
Okay. And the comment about the phone call, actually, that's something we do have to kind of look at. If for some people, a phone call is going to be the best thing, and best to understand. So that's something to take into, or best way to communicate to something. So.
Can we just maybe, can you add a note to just wordsmith that? Because I think it could be better written. I mean, I have a thought, but I don't want to share because it's going to burn up time. But maybe we just wordsmith that so it feels smoother. Right now, it feels like it's hitting a couple speed bumps.
Okay, we'll put a note that this one will wordsmith offline. But it feels like we have the general idea for this one.
Thank you. I think that would help. So Steve, you can probably, help just clarify that, how you can make it a little bit clearer.
All right, in that case, let's move on to that second one, educate licensees and consumers about the enforcement process to clarify for stakeholders and roles and responsibilities in the decision-making process. Do we have any adjustments we want to make to this one?
Kelly?
I just have a quick question because I'm a little confused. It says educate licensees and consumers about the enforcement process to clarify for stakeholders. Are the stakeholders the licensees and consumers, or are the stakeholders everyone? Because like a stakeholder is like, for instance, the AG's office, DCA, organizations, or should it sort of be narrowed to mean educate licensees and consumers about the enforcement process to clarify for them the roles and responsibilities in decision making?
I think that makes more sense. Yeah, I don't know my stakeholders.
Yeah.
I think you can just get rid of stakeholders on that and then educate licensees and consumers about the enforcement process to clarify the roles and responsibilities in the to clarify roles and responsibilities in the decision making.
That last part, I'm not sure. That sounds a little off target and not directed at anything. I'm wondering if we could maybe make that a little more targeted and say, clarify the roles and responsibilities in the disposition of their case, in something that's a little more targeted, because decision-making process.
How about in the disciplinary process?
I mean, just something that's a little more targeted than what it was, that's all.
Okay, we'll take out decision-making process. All right. Gonna quickly scan all the cameras for anyone who has a raised hand. Any more comments on this one? I see Christina. Christina, you are muted.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm like just naturally getting to the flow. So it looks like there are too many processes. So I'm trying to think about it's about the enforcement, and disciplinary process. So how can we just simplify, educate licensees and consumers about, okay, maybe it's really about to educate, to educate, the role and responsibility about the enforcement and disciplinary process. The role and responsibility of the enforcement and the discipline, or in the disciplinary process.
Is that an addition, Christina, or it's actually a replacement? I'm confused on.
Yeah, because that seems very
very broad.
No, it just seems wonky, and I'm unclear why we're
Okay,
changing what number 2 says, because I think, and it's just me, I think it says what it's designed to say, so I'm wondering why we're still wordsmithing it, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so
because
there are
you're
two
using the word process twice in the same sentence. You could also say responsibilities in disciplinary matters versus, if you want to take the second process out of there to make it sound more fluid.
Yeah, just, so there are two sections, right? So there's the education process and then clarifying the role and responsibility. And so I just want to, combine those two.
I think it's a little bit redundant, Christina, in my opinion. It creates more confusion because it seems like we're talking about the same thing, even though I understand. Because if I'm, for instance, if I'm someone who needs to place a complaint as a consumer, if I'm a consumer, the first message is much clearer about the scope of this intent, right? Educate. How do I place? Do I call the BBS? Do I file an email? How do I place a complaint? So that educational process, if we add more to it about the roles and responsibility, it becomes a little bit too confusing. Even though it's clear what you want to say, but it's adding other steps that are not necessary into the process. I don't know.
I mean,
so what I look at it is like licensees and consumers are two different, they're at two different opposites. So, so are we educating the consumer about complaining process, or about making complaints, and then, helping, the licensees and registrants to clarify, the roles and responsibility in the disciplinary matters. So in that spectrum, of the, the whole from complaining to enforcement, it's different things. So that's what I'm trying to think about. It's like it addressed the whole thing, but at the same time, it just kind of like clump it together. It's just not clear to me.
Christina,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Christina, to me, it doesn't seem confusing because there's two groups in one process. It's the enforcement process, and we're educating both the stakeholders and or the licensees and consumers about the one process. That's the way I'm reading it. I think the only thing we're missing is that after roles and responsibilities, there has to be some sort of person there, because it just says clarify the roles and responsibilities of the people involved in disciplinary, something like that, because there has to be a person there. Roles and responsibilities can't float abstractly.
how about shortening it?
So just to step in for a moment, I kind of feel that Chris's last thing was actually like spot on. And I also think when I read this, we're looking at people before they're in a disciplinary process, that this goal is actually letting people in the world, people like me, or who are just a licensee out in the world, or a consumer that I may be working with, educating them that there is a disciplinary process that takes place. So I think we need to be careful to understand this is not the same as the first one, which is talking about people who are being disciplined, but this is actually letting both stakeholders and consumers know that there is a disciplinary process and this is how it works. That's how I'm reading this. And I think we're starting to confuse it with people who are in process of discipline. And I'm reading this as completely separate.
Why not? Could we do just to shorten it, educate licensees and consumers about the disciplinary process? That's not really a good objective, but maybe increase education materials to the licensing consumers about the disciplinary process, something to that effect, which would include roles and responsibilities, or how they come into play in that process, and how the board comes into play in that process. Everybody. So just shorten it. Short and sweet.
Sounds better to me. Yeah. Anyone else on this?
If you use the word licensees, then you will have to probably add the word registrants, because not all the registrants, licensees, and consumers.
There's always that argument. I always consider them licensees, but that's true. I guess, yes, we could say registrants too in there.
Even though we don't reinforce, well, okay. Yeah.
Because technically, or you can say associates, but basically, the licensees are the one who really hold the license. I hear what you're saying, Steve, but You know, sometimes in the law, in the law, we always separate those. So, I mean, we don't need to get stuck in,
No, we can,
yeah, we can move
I hear
on.
you.
Yeah.
All right. In that case, this will be another one that we will wordsmith on offline. And then just as a quick reminder, we will have a hard stop at 12:45. So I'm hoping maybe we can get through these last three, go to public comment, and then at that point we can go to the closed session for the board meeting. For the other three objective or goal areas that we have, we may have to do a separate session to work through those, and I'll coordinate with Steve on that. So moving on, number 3, do we have any adjustments we want to make to that one, or do we like how it is currently phrased?
I think.
Go ahead.
No, I just feel like I'm talking a lot, but I always talk a lot, so I'm just used to it. So I want to make room for other people. So I'll hold my breath.
I do see a hand raised from Wendy.
Okay, when did you go? Because I've been talking a lot.
I feel like this one doesn't ends too early. So we're going to complete a review and then what are we going to do with it? So kind of goes back to the board's discussion about, the action step. So are we going to complete a review and then make recommendations to the board for changes? And then if that's the case, does this belong under the legislation section? My 2 comments.
All right, so my co-facilitator has added and make recommendations. Does that sound like that fits this objective?
Yes.
What about also adding the word equity for equitable or equity, clarity, equitable, equity and cohesiveness and effectiveness. Something like that, because I think that's what the board, has been talking a lot, about just being, more equitable.
Equitable in its implementation.
Yeah.
So I think I like that. I wonder if we end with equity, I think we can take out effectiveness because I think the first 3 things will lead to effectiveness. That's just my thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have clarity, cohesiveness, and equity. All right. And then I'm going to quickly scan for any other raised hands. Any other comments on this objective? Does not appear to be. So let's go ahead and move on to number 4. Do we have any adjustments that we would like to make to this one?
So I have a question for Steve. When you look at this objective, what does this mean to you?
So part of this looks to me, this looks like, really establishing, some matrices possibly in-house to determine what decisions are being made and kind of being able to look at, historical decisions and how we're making decisions in reviewing to make sure that we've got a clear and concise, way of that we are making decisions, looking at how the board votes, looking at how, we move on cases. So that's kind of part of it. I'm looking at that. And then the other thing too is like looking at also the probation program to make sure that, it's not really barring somebody from licensure, that it's really a rehabilitative process. instead. So that's kind of what I was looking at in this. There's some big tasks in there, but that's what basically I was looking at.
So perhaps a slight change of language is evaluate and establish versus just evaluate, or do you think you need the 4 years to evaluate?
No, that's true. I mean, evaluate and establish or implement. Yeah, I mean, establish. I think establish is good.
All right, any other adjustments here? I think I saw Christina raise her hand.
Yeah, I did. I actually, I think it makes sense to me, John, because I think, we really can't talk about, the things that we discussed in the closed session, but I think it would be really great, to have, some, for the staff, to also, have some sort of like a good standard, when they look at, for example, asking to eliminate or asking to reduce a certain terms and condition, and how, that is relating to, and how it's becoming, just bear in mind that rehabilitation, that sort of like, matrix that, Steve was talking about, it's more like a clear and equitable process, but at the same time, also taking into the consideration that, the most important thing is about, how to assess, their rehabilitation and how do we protect the public. So it makes sense to me if but I also echo with your question, what does it look like? What really it is. So I'm pretty happy with the language, and I think it's something that absolutely doable, for Steve to, to also look at that.
And I would just add, because I don't think it needs to be changed, I would just add that maybe this is one of those enduring goals, objectives that's in every plan, because we should be continually doing that sort of review to ensure that they're equitable and relevant.
This is Kelly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and you don't need to change the number 4. This just kind of stuck in my head because, in reading number 4, it sounds very much like you're looking toward creating a probation structured decision-making model, like the sort we would use in juvenile or CPS or criminal adult probation. That's just, if you want to write a note or tag a note, that sort of is what it's sounding like to me.
All right, so we're going to add a note about the probation process for number 4.
No, I was just saying structured decision-making model. That's, it just kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah, because the probation process is out of our jurisdiction. Okay, anyone else? Wonderful.
Okay.
I guess we can move.
Quickly do number 5 real quick and then go to public comment. So any comments on number 5 here?
I would just.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I would just add increase a diverse pool of qualified enforcement subject matter and blah, blah, blah. Just to give that intentional search.
And change effective and fair to equitable, just so our language is starting to sound like we actually have a point of view.
All right, so we'll put equitable instead of effective and fair. All right. Any other comments on this last one?
Nobody is in. Okay.
All right. At this point, I believe we're going to go to public comment, correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you so much.
Wait, could I hold?
I apologize. Go ahead.
So I have a question. I don't know if it's in something later, but I want to make sure that we look at this. So we have talked about one of our big enforcement objectives is to do education with the DAG's office. And I don't see that anywhere in this particular set of enforcement objectives. Maybe it's somewhere else that I haven't noticed yet. We've also talked very clearly, I know there are a few of us that are really on this idea of moving the enforcement from punitive to rehabilitative, and I don't feel that's being addressed in the enforcement objectives either. I just have questions. Anyone know, is that somewhere else, either of those two subjects? And if not, maybe when we go back to the drawing board, we look at how do we bring those into this conversation as well.
On both of those, on the second one with the rehabilitation process, rehabilitative type of process
versus punitive.
I mean, versus punitive, I would see that in number 4 as one of the things we would be looking at. Whether if you want to call that out and make it more apparent, that's that could be your choice. As in the community education or the combining with the DAG, I think we do have in the outreach.
Yes.
Or no, the board effectiveness. I think I have in there a goal objective is kind of like increase the education, partly to board members about, not just about the board, but also their role. And I think that actually could fit in there because that could fit in there. Whether you wanted to call that out specifically, though, again, is kind of, I know that's on there. So
we've talked multiple times about trying to set up more education for the DAG as far as it comes to understanding substance use disorders and pieces like that so that they can be more effective in their work. And I'm just wondering if that needs to come under an objective specifically somewhere.
I believe, John, I actually read that. I'm confused if it was under education because I know we have it. I was trying to scroll through to see where it is, but there is an objective that reflects the education of our AJs. So we could repeat it here, or I don't know, Steve, maybe we can scan it through, but definitely that's always been our intent. So I agree with you. There should be, I know I read it in all those.
Well, it definitely was in our old, in the last strategic plan. Yeah, I mean, whether you want to call it out or we just include it as an objective with, number 4 could fit a lot of that. I mean, really, to kind of put it into there. Because we're looking at the full process, education of the AG is going to help out with that.
So can I make a proposal? So just to go back to what John was saying, on number 4, perhaps we can finish that sentence just adding, after enforcement issues to ensure a fair, equitable process that reflects the rehabilitation's intention of the board versus the punitive or something on that, with a proper language. But so I think we need to include definitely that conversation in there. And maybe number 4 is the best place, John. I don't know if you feel okay with that. But then I wouldn't add this other piece about educational, the AJs, because I don't know if it fits all in that, because that's really educational. So I think we had to give them its own space because it's very important too. So I don't know if it fits on the objective of enforcement, because we're talking about enforcement here, not just not so much about education and outreach.
Well, what we found, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for sure the rehabilitation piece can go in number 4, but if somebody could clarify if there's if the education piece is somewhere else that we're not seeing right in front of us right now, because I definitely think though that rehabilitation, even just the word, should be added to number 4, like Max was saying, that reflects the rehabilitation. Maybe take out intention. I would just say that reflects rehabilitation versus punitive measures to assist, or somebody help me. I was like, to.
No, I think I can there. Yeah. Versus punitive, and that's it. So that we don't have to. That's really clear an intent.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot with what I was hoping to get in there. So yes, I think that wording sounds really nice and on spot.
Just one last thought. Is there a reason why we have fair and equitable? I think equitable sort of incorporates fair in it.
Yeah.
For equitable process.
So I want to just remind, so I understand, that maybe somewhere to also add, to, for consumer protection. I understand that, we're kind of like always want to support, the licensees or the registrants, who go on to, the disciplinary action. But also, our mandate really is about consumer protection. So I'm wondering if we can actually just, that reflect rehabilitation versus punitive measure, for the purpose of consumer protection. Something like that, so that we really just embrace the fact that, this is not, this is really is, making sure that, they are safe to practice.
All right. And this is something we can always come back to since we do need to go over the remaining 3 goal areas. So perhaps I can work with Steve to kind of workshop these offline. And then when we meet again to go over the next 3 goal areas, we can kind of quickly review these and then go over those last goal areas. So at this point, do we want to move to public comment and then wrap up?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe nobody else is saying yes. Thank you.
All right. All right. In that case, let me go ahead and open up the question and answer feature for public comment. Members of the public, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, please use that raise hand feature or click that Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. All right, it appears there are no requests for public comment on this item. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So at this point, like I said earlier, we'll have to revisit the strategic planning session so we can go over those remaining 3 goal areas. And I will work with Steve on when to kind of get that scheduled.
Okay. And how many, thank you, moderator. Thank you so much for both of your supports. How many, I see we have many slides that we haven't, many objectives that we haven't addressed today, correct? Many.
Give me 1 second. I can actually calculate how many are left for you.
We have 3 left, I believe.
3 goal areas, but objectives, plus 7 plus 4. So that's 16.
Okay, so this just a procedural questions. Does it grant us that we have to come back together to finish this, or what would be the way to go? Is it going to be done remotely? I mean, each one of us will send a feedback for each one of those, or how do we go about it?
Well, we can't. We have to because it's a board action. We can't. I can't really send it out to everyone, get their opinion, and come back. I mean, we can. I think we definitely do have to meet again, or we have November that we were going to bring this up again. We could do a short review in November on the November board meeting. That's another option.
Yeah, as much as I don't like to meet too often, I find it almost not logistically feasible for us to have because it will never be short. We know, right? I mean, it's gonna be a lot of feedback. So this is gonna take another half a day. If we crunch it into the November board meeting, I'm a little bit concerned about that, Steve. So I don't know. Maybe we need. Maybe we need to come to agreement of meeting again sooner.
Yeah, let me think about ways we can do that. I think it's going to have to be a meeting sooner because at the November board meeting, I'd like us to actually vote on it, and so we can get it in place before or in January. But let me see what we can do. You know,
I mean, just from my perspective, I mean, meeting from 9 to 1 works, so I can do this again if we need to before then. This really works for me. It's the longer days are a little more challenging, but I can do this again. Just FYI, this works.
So any chance that we can actually meet in October?
I can take a vote. I can send out some information to take a vote to see what, maybe pick some meeting dates, and then send that out and see where we're at. So I'd
Okay,
prefer, yeah.
let's do that. Thank you, Steve. I don't want to take too much time. I know that.
We gotta get these.
So I know we had to move in a closed sessions, and the moderator will make sure that we don't have any members of the public. Am I correct?
Correct. So let me go ahead and make sure that I have our staff members.
Oops. I did it again.
I'm actually going to be leaving, everyone. But I had let them know that, so I have to go pick up the baby. But I appreciate this, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Bye, Crystal.
Hey, Max, can you hear me?
Now, yes.
Oh, hey, did you guys want to take a quick biological break while we clear up the room and make sure we have everybody on right?
Yeah, I was about to say that I'm dancing on my chair. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
I'll stay here and make sure we have everybody in here correct, and then you guys can take a quick a couple minute break and come back.
Can we do like 105, folks?
Sure.
10 minutes. Okay. Thank you.